The locker room smelled of chlorine and sweat, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as steam drifted from the showers. Kira Brennan stood wrapped in a standard-issue towel, her red hair plastered dark against her skull, freckled skin still flushed from the morning's water training. She moved toward the shower stalls with a quiet efficiency that had become second nature over 8 years of service. Behind her, Duke Wellington's younger sister Emma navigated the tiled floor with her visitor's pass clipped to her gym bag. She was here to tour the base, to see where her brother was training, to understand the world he'd entered. Neither woman paid much attention to the other in the crowded space, where a dozen female personnel moved between lockers and showers. Emma turned too quickly at the corner, her bag swinging wide. It caught Kira's shoulder just as she reached for the shower handle. The impact wasn't hard, but unexpected. The towel slipped from Kira's grip, sliding down to catch at her elbows. For 3 seconds that seemed to stretch into eternity, Kira stood exposed. Not her body, which the towel still mostly covered, but something far more revealing hung around her neck on a simple ball chain. 2 sets of military dog tags gleamed under the harsh lights. The first set bore her own information, standard issue, but it was the rank insignia that made Emma freeze mid-apology. Lieutenant Commander, 04, United States Navy. The second set of tags carried a different name, a different service number, but the same rank. Commander Patricia Aldridge, KIA Syria, 2022. Emma's hand went to her mouth. She'd been a Navy yeoman for 4 years before getting out. She knew what she was looking at. Her phone was already in her other hand. The camera app opened from taking photos of the base for her parents. The shutter sound clicked once before her brain caught up to her reflexes. Kira's eyes snapped to Emma's face. For a moment, something dangerous flickered there. Something that had nothing to do with the petite woman who'd been struggling through basic training exercises all week. Then it was gone, replaced by careful neutrality. "I'm so sorry," Emma stammered, already backing away. "I didn't mean to. I'll delete it." But they both knew the damage was done. In the age of social media, photos had a way of spreading before deletion was even possible. Kira pulled the towel back into place, tucked the tags under the terry cloth, and said nothing. She simply walked into the shower stall and closed the curtain. Emma stood frozen for another moment, staring at the closed curtain, then at her phone. The photo was already uploading to the base's internal social network before she could stop it. Her caption was innocent enough. "Mystery woman in recruit training has commander rank?" Within 3 hours, it would be shared 50 times. Within 6, Master Chief Crawford would see it. Within 12, Admiral Richardson would summon Kira to his office. But all of that was still to come. The screen went black, text appearing in white. 72 hours earlier, the military transport bus bounced along the dusty road toward Naval Special Warfare Training Facility, suspension groaning with each pothole. Late afternoon sun slanted through salt-stained windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. 25 recruits sat in various states of nervous energy, some talking loud enough to mask their fear, others sitting in tense silence. Kira pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, watching the Pacific Ocean appear and disappear between buildings as they approached Coronado. At 28, she'd made this drive before, many times, but never like this, dressed in fatigues 3 sizes too large, her small frame swimming in fabric meant for someone much bigger. The boots on her feet were the smallest the supply depot had, and they still felt like boats. She was 5'2" in bare feet, maybe 110 pounds, soaking wet. Red hair pulled back in a regulation bun, pale skin that showed every emotion in the form of freckles that darkened when she was angry or embarrassed. Green eyes that had seen things no one on this bus could imagine. Hands that looked delicate but could strip a rifle in 14 seconds or apply a tourniquet that would save a life. 8 years ago, she'd been the youngest woman to complete BUD/S training. 6 years ago, she'd made SEAL Team 3. 3 years ago, she'd been promoted to Lieutenant Commander, one of only a handful of women to hold that rank in naval special warfare. 2 years ago, she'd watched her mentor die in Syria because a male SEAL team leader dismissed her tactical assessment as overly cautious female thinking. Commander Patricia Aldridge had been right about the building being rigged with explosives. She'd been right about the exact location of the charges. She'd been right about the timing, and she died proving it, pulling 3 men out of the rubble, including the team leader who'd ignored her warning. Kira touched the dog tags under her shirt, hers and Pat's, linked together on the same chain. A promise she'd made at the funeral, a mission she'd been planning ever since. "Look at that tiny thing," a voice said from 3 rows back. Duke Wellington, former college football linebacker, biceps straining against his uniform sleeves. He wasn't trying to whisper. "She looks like she's wearing her big brother's uniform. What is she, 16? Laughter rippled through the bus. Not cruel, exactly. Just the easy mockery of men who'd grown up in a world where size equaled capability, where small meant weak, where female meant not quite good enough for this particular club. "Probably here for the administrative program," another voice added. Vin Castellano, construction worker from Boston, arms covered in tattoos, hands that look like they could crush concrete. "This is SEAL prep training. She's definitely on the wrong bus." More laughter. Kira kept her face toward the window, but her fingers traced the outline of the dog tags through her shirt. She'd heard it all before, every single variation of the joke. Pat used to say it was an advantage. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you don't belong. Then show them what you can really do. The problem was, Pat's approach had gotten her killed. Because sometimes the underestimation wasn't just an advantage. Sometimes it was a liability that cost lives. The bus pulled through the main gate of Naval Special Warfare Training Facility. Guard towers flanked the entrance, American flags snapping in the ocean breeze. Buildings spread out in neat rows, parade grounds and obstacle courses visible between structures. In the distance, the Pacific Ocean stretched to the horizon, endless blue under the California sun. Drill instructors were already waiting as the bus hissed to a stop. Master Chief William Crawford stood front and center, a man carved from granite and bad decisions. 52 years old, 27 years in the Navy, face weathered by sun and salt, and years of turning civilians into warriors. He'd served in Desert Storm, in Somalia, in the early days of Afghanistan and Iraq. His chest held enough medals to open a small jewelry store, and his eyes held the kind of assessment that could peel paint off a wall. "Off the bus," he bellowed, voice carrying across the parking area like a crack of thunder. "2 lines, alphabetical order, move with purpose." The recruits scrambled off the bus in controlled chaos. Kira moved with them, neither first nor last, just another body in the crowd. But Crawford's eyes found her immediately. His expression shifted, just slightly, confusion, then concern, then something that might have been sympathy. She knew that look. She'd seen it 100 times. The look that said, "You're in the wrong place." The look that said someone made a mistake. The look that said, "Sweetheart, the admin building is that way." "Listen up," Crawford continued, his gaze moving away from Kira, but returning every few seconds like a compass finding north. "You are here for Naval Special Warfare preparatory training. This is not summer camp. This is not a vacation. This is not a place where you get participation trophies for showing up. Half of you won't make it through the first week. 3/4 won't make it to graduation. And that's fine. We don't need everyone. We need the best." He began pacing along the line, hands clasped behind his back, studying each recruit with the intensity of a jeweler examining diamonds for flaws. When he reached Kira, he stopped. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, in a voice that was almost gentle, almost kind, he said, "Miss, are you certain you're in the correct program?" 25 pairs of eyes turned to look at her, some curious, some amused, some already dismissive. Kira met Crawford's gaze and held it. "Yes, Master Chief. SEAL prep training is extremely demanding. physically, mentally, emotionally. There are other programs that might be more appropriate for someone of your, he paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing, stature. I'm aware of the requirements, Master Chief. I'm here for SEAL prep. Something flickered in Crawford's eyes. Respect, maybe, or concern, or the frustration of a man who knew he was about to watch someone get hurt and couldn't stop it. He nodded once, sharp and final, and continued down the line. The processing took 2 hours. Medical checks, gear issue, barracks assignment, endless paperwork that turned humans into numbers, and numbers into data points that would track their progress or failure. The supply sergeant looked at Kira's frame and sighed like a man asked to fit an ocean into a teacup. Smallest we have, he said, handing over fatigues that would need to be rolled at the cuffs and belted tight at the waist. You sure about this? Yes, Sergeant. Your funeral, he muttered, but not unkindly. Barracks B housed 20 recruits in a long room lined with metal bunk beds and wall lockers. Kira was assigned a lower bunk near the back, next to a tall blonde woman who moved with the careful control of someone trained to maintain awareness of their surroundings at all times. Sloan Garrett, the woman said, extending a hand. Former Boston PD. Kira Brennan. The handshake was brief, professional. Sloan's grip was strong, testing slightly. Kira matched it exactly, no more, no less. No offense, Sloan said, studying Kira with the assessment of someone who'd spent years reading people for threats and lies. But you look like you should be in college, not here. So I've been told. This isn't meant to be discouraging, just realistic. The physical standards are brutal. The dropout rate is insane. And I say this as someone who's done police academy, SWAT training, and a year on tactical response. This is different. Kira began unpacking her gear with movements that were precise, practiced, military perfect. Each item went into her wall locker in exactly the right place, positioned according to regulations that most recruits wouldn't memorize for another week. Socks folded in thirds, shirts pressed flat with collars aligned, boots lined up heel to heel with laces tucked inside. Sloan watched this display with growing interest. The speed was one thing, the accuracy was another, but it was the automatic nature of it that caught attention. This wasn't someone who'd been taught these skills recently. This was muscle memory worn smooth by years of repetition. Where'd you serve? Sloan asked quietly. I haven't, not yet. The lie came easily. Kira had been practicing variations of it for weeks. Right. Sloan's tone said she didn't believe it for a second, but wouldn't push. Not yet. The mess hall at 1800 hours was a study in nervous energy and false bravado. Long tables filled with recruits who talked too loud about their backgrounds, their motivations, their absolute certainty that they'd be in the graduating class. The food was institutional but plentiful. Protein and carbohydrates designed to fuel bodies about to be pushed past their limits. Kira took a tray to a corner table, choosing a seat that gave her a view of the entire room. Old habits. Always know your exits. Always position yourself where you can see threats before they see you. Always maintain awareness of group dynamics and social hierarchies as they form. Duke Wellington held court at the center table, his size and charisma drawing others like gravity. He talked about his grandfather who'd served in World War II, his father who'd done 2 tours in the Gulf War before getting out and telling his son never to join the military. Duke had joined anyway. 3 generations of warriors, he said, and now it was his turn to prove he belonged in the family legacy. Vin Castellano sat nearby, quieter but no less present. He dropped out of high school, he told anyone who asked. Spent 15 years swinging hammers and pouring concrete, building things with his hands while people with college degrees told him where to build them. He was here to prove he was more than a high school dropout, more than just muscle, that his value wasn't measured by formal education, but by what he could do when it mattered. Cole Bridger, the youngest recruit at 23, had the lean build of someone who'd spent his life in water. California surfer turned lifeguard, skin tanned the particular bronze that came from 6 hours a day under the sun. He talked about growing up on the beach, about understanding tides and currents the way other people understood traffic patterns. But there was something else there too, something in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. A grief that sat just below the surface, like a riptide waiting to pull you under. "Hey, little mouse," Vin called across the mess hall. His voice carried, meant to. "You sure you can handle the physical requirements here? Maybe you should call your parents and have them come pick you up before things get real." The table erupted in laughter. Not malicious exactly, just the casual cruelty of men testing boundaries, establishing hierarchy, figuring out who belonged and who didn't. Kira took another bite of her food, chewed slowly, and looked up at Vin with eyes that were calm and steady and absolutely empty of fear or embarrassment or any of the reactions he'd been expecting. She swallowed, took a sip of water, and said in a voice that carried just as well as his had, "I'll manage." Something in her tone made Vin's smile falter, just slightly, just enough that a few people noticed. There was a quality to her composure that didn't quite fit with her appearance, a stillness that suggested deep water rather than shallow. The moment passed, conversation resumed. But Sloane, sitting at a nearby table, filed the interaction away for future reference. As the evening wore on, recruits began drifting back to the barracks in small groups. Some formed fast friendships, bonding over shared anxiety and military family backgrounds. Others stayed solitary, preferring to process the enormity of what they'd undertaken in private silence. Kira retreated to her bunk early, while most of the others were still in the common area, comparing notes about their first impressions of the instructors and facility. She lay in the darkness, listening to the conversations drift through the open door. Many of them were about her, wondering how she'd made it through the selection process, speculating about administrative errors or diversity quotas or the possibility that she had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. None of them realized that their speculation was exactly what she'd intended, that being underestimated was the entire point, that every assumption they made about her was a data point she'd collect and analyze, that their bias, casual and unexamined, was precisely what she'd been sent here to document. What none of them could know was that Kira had specifically requested minimal background information be shared with training staff and fellow recruits. Her real identity was known only to Admiral Richardson, Captain Foster, and a handful of others monitoring this unique experiment. The goal was simple in concept, brutally difficult in execution. Could superior capability overcome initial assumptions? How long would it take for performance to override appearance? Would competence eventually be recognized regardless of whether it came packaged in the expected form? And underneath the official mission lay the personal one. Pat's voice in her memory, sharp and clear as if she were in the bunk above instead of in the ground at Arlington. Show them what real strength looks like. Don't tell them you're capable. Prove it. Make them see it. Make them question every assumption they brought with them. Kira touched the dog tags under her shirt one more time. Tomorrow would bring their first real physical challenges. Tomorrow she'd start walking the razor's edge between revealing too much too soon and hiding so well that the experiment became meaningless. Tomorrow the underestimation would begin transforming into something else. She allowed herself a small smile in the darkness. They thought they knew what was coming. They had no idea. Lights out was called at 2200 hours, the barracks settling into uneasy quiet, broken by occasional coughs, shifting bodies, whispered conversations that died away into sleep. Kira lay awake, her internal clock already adjusted to wake 5 minutes before reveille. She'd learned years ago how to function on minimal sleep, how to rest without truly sleeping, how to maintain awareness even in supposed safety. Somewhere in the building, a phone buzzed with a notification. Then another, and another. A photo was spreading across base social media, shared by people who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Emma Wellington's innocent caption would spark a firestorm of speculation that wouldn't fully ignite until morning. But the fuse had been lit. In his office on the other side of the base, Master Chief Crawford sat at his desk reviewing the roster for the morning's training. His eyes kept drifting back to one name. Brennan, Kira. Something about her didn't add up. The way she'd stood at attention during processing. The way she'd organized her gear. The way she'd looked at him when he'd suggested she might be in the wrong program. That wasn't the look of someone uncertain. That was the look of someone choosing not to respond. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Captain Foster. Something odd about one of the new recruits. Recommend additional background check. The response came back within minutes. Background is need to know. Continue training as normal. Do not single out for additional scrutiny. Crawford stared at the message for a long moment. In 27 years of service, he'd learned that need to know usually meant, we're not going to tell you, and you're not going to like it when you find out. He saved the message and closed his phone. Tomorrow would be interesting. The 4:30 wake-up call shattered the peaceful silence like a flashbang grenade. Crawford burst through the barracks doors, banging a metal trash can lid like a gong from hell. Rise and shine, candidates. Time to separate the warriors from the wannabes. Kira was already awake, had been for the past 5 minutes, lying still while her body completed its final rest cycle. Around her, chaos erupted. Recruits stumbled out of bunks, some falling in their haste, others grabbing for uniforms in the dim light of emergency lighting that preceded the full fluorescence, flickering to life. 2 minutes to formation, Crawford bellowed, his voice somehow louder than the trash can lid had been. Anyone not in proper uniform with boots laced will be doing push-ups until breakfast. And trust me, you don't want to miss breakfast. It's the last easy thing you'll experience today. While others scrambled frantically, Kira moved with quiet efficiency. Her uniform had been laid out perfectly the night before, boots beside the bed with laces already prepared in a pattern that would allow quick securing. She was dressed and laced in 90 seconds, standing by her bunk while half the barracks was still trying to figure out which arm went in which sleeve. Sloane noticed. She'd been watching Kira since the night before, and this confirmed what she'd already suspected. This wasn't someone learning how to do morning routine under pressure. This was someone who'd done it so many times that their body went through the motions while their brain was still waking up. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" Sloane whispered as they headed toward the door. "Practice," Kira replied simply. They fell into formation on the parade ground as the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. The Pacific Ocean stretched out beyond the base perimeter, waves rolling in with the eternal rhythm that had been here long before the military arrived and would be here long after. The air smelled of salt and possibility and the kind of fear that came from knowing you were about to be tested in ways you couldn't fully imagine. Crawford walked down the line, inspecting each recruit with eyes that missed nothing. Uniform deficiencies were noted with sharp comments. Proper boot lacing earned extra physical training. Poor posture was corrected with hands-on adjustment that bordered on violent. When he reached Kira, he stopped, studied her from head to toe. Her uniform was as perfect as regulation allowed, with equipment 3 sizes too large. Her boots were laced in a pattern he recognized but couldn't quite place. Her posture was parade ground perfect, weight distributed evenly, chin at the proper angle, eyes focused on the middle distance. The sun was barely above the horizon, the air still cool enough to make breathing easy. Crawford set a punishing pace, clearly intending to identify who had prepared properly and who had assumed they could coast on natural athleticism. Within the first mile, the pack began to spread out. Natural runners pulled ahead. Those who'd spent time preparing maintained solid positioning. Those who'd assumed football conditioning or construction work had prepared them for endurance running began to understand their mistake. Kira ran in the middle of the pack, maintaining exactly the pace needed to stay with the average performers. Her breathing was controlled, rhythmic, in through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 4, hold for 4. Box breathing, standard SEAL technique for maintaining oxygen efficiency during extended physical exertion. She'd run distances that made this morning jog look like a warm-up. 5 miles with full combat load in Afghanistan heat. 10 miles through Iraqi sand carrying a wounded teammate. 26.2 miles during the Marine Corps Marathon, running backwards to set a Guinness World Record for charity, while her teammates ran normal direction beside her. This was easy. The hard part was making it look like it wasn't easy. Making it look like she was working just hard enough to keep up. Mile 3. Duke Wellington began to struggle. His college linebacker training had focused on explosive power and short sprints. Sustained endurance wasn't part of the football conditioning playbook. His face had gone from pink to red, his breathing from controlled to labored. He was weaving slightly, classic signs of heat exhaustion, even in the cool morning air. Kira moved closer, matching his pace as it began to slow. She pulled her water bottle from her belt, one of the skills every SEAL learned was drinking while running, and held it out to him during a brief moment when the instructors were focused elsewhere. "Small sips," she said quietly, "and control your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Longer exhales than inhales." Duke looked at her with surprise that almost made him stumble. Here was this tiny woman who looked like she should be drowning in her oversized uniform, who wasn't even breathing hard, offering him help like she was on a casual jog instead of a pace that had him seeing stars at the edges of his vision. "Thanks," he managed between gasps. "How are you not winded?" "Practice." The same answer she'd given Sloane. True but incomplete. The kind of truth that revealed nothing while seeming to explain everything. Duke followed her breathing advice and immediately felt the difference. His vision cleared slightly. His legs stopped feeling quite so much like concrete. He wasn't going to win any races, but he wasn't going to collapse either. And that made all the difference between finishing and failing. The run concluded back at the starting point, where recruits bent double, hands on knees, trying to remember how to breathe normally. 7 had fallen behind badly enough to earn remedial training. Duke had made it, barely, and he knew exactly who'd saved him. He looked at Kira with new eyes, reassessing, wondering. "All right, candidates," Crawford called out, not even slightly winded despite having run the entire 5 miles at the front of the pack. 30 minutes to shower and breakfast. Then we hit the obstacle course. That's where things get interesting. That's where we see who has heart and who has excuses. The obstacle course sprawled across 2 acres of carefully designed punishment. Rope climbs, wall scaling, cargo nets, balance beams, rope traverses, tire runs, low crawls through mud. Each station was designed to test a different aspect of physical capability and mental determination. Each was specifically calibrated to break people who relied on single strengths rather than comprehensive fitness. Recruits gathered at the starting line, now organized into small teams of 5. Kira found herself grouped with Duke, Sloane, Vin, and Cole. They'd be running the course together, scored both individually and as a unit. Competition within cooperation. The military's favorite kind of motivation. "Listen up," the course instructor barked. He was a lean man with the build of someone who'd spent his entire life climbing things that weren't meant to be climbed. "This course is designed to test every aspect of your physical capability. Strength, endurance, coordination, balance, and the kind of determination that keeps you moving when your body is begging you to stop. You will all fail at something today. The question is whether you fail and quit or fail and keep trying." The whistle blew. Teams launched themselves at the first obstacle. The rope climb came third in the sequence. 30 feet of thick hemp rope hanging from a steel frame. No footholds, no assists. Pure upper body strength and technique. Duke attacked it with football player aggression, powering up through sheer muscle. He made it, but slowly, arms shaking by the top. Sloane went next, police training evident in her steady progress. Vin struggled, his construction worker bulk working against him on the climb. Cole made it look easy, lifeguard fitness translating well to the challenge. Then Kira's turn. She approached the rope with casual confidence that didn't match her size. Gripped it at the bottom, she looked up to find the course instructor staring at her with an expression somewhere between impressed and deeply suspicious. "Where did you learn to climb like that, Brennan?" "Had a good instructor back home. Rock climbing." "That wasn't rock climbing technique. That was military rope climb. Specifically, that was the method we teach in advanced infantry school." Kira shrugged, non-committal. "Maybe my instructor used to be military." Kira hit the wall at a run, planted one foot about 5 feet up, used that momentum to reach higher with her hands, caught the top edge, and pulled herself up and over in one smooth motion. The entire sequence took maybe 3 seconds. Textbook perfect. The kind of perfect that came from having done it hundreds of times under various conditions until it became muscle memory encoded at a level deeper than thought. By the time the team completed the full course, Kira had demonstrated capability that was so far beyond what a civilian should possess that even the other recruits were starting to whisper. Sloane kept shooting her looks that were equal parts impressed and suspicious. Duke couldn't quite reconcile the tiny woman who'd helped him on the run with the person who just destroyed every obstacle like they were specifically designed for her skill set. Vin was the most direct. As they stood cooling down, he moved close to Kira and said quietly, "Who the hell are you really?" "Just someone trying to make it through training." "Bullshit. That wasn't beginner performance. That was professional level. So I'm asking again, who are you?" Before Kira could respond, Crawford's voice cut across the training area. "Brennan, front and center." Every head turned. The summons was never good. Kira jogged over to where Crawford stood with the course instructor and Gunnery Sergeant Hayes, who ran the hand-to-hand combat program. "Brennan," Crawford said slowly, studying her with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that had too many pieces missing. "Your performance today has been exceptional, beyond exceptional. We're going to test your hand-to-hand skills. If you're as good there as you've been everywhere else, we're going to have some serious questions about your background." The combat training area was a large mat surface surrounded by safety padding. Recruits gathered around the perimeter to watch. Hand-to-hand was always popular. It was visceral, immediate, easy to understand. Someone won, someone lost, and everyone learned something about pain and pride and the difference between the two. "Garrett," Hayes called out, "you're up. Defense scenarios. Brennan will attack, you defend, and counter." Sloane stepped onto the mat, settling into a stance that showed her police defensive tactics training. Kira moved to face her, smaller, seemingly less threatening, still wearing the oversized fatigues that made her look even younger than she was. "Standard rear chokehold," Hayes instructed. "Garrett, apply. Brennan, defend and counter." Sloane moved behind Kira, wrapped her arm around Kira's throat in a textbook rear naked choke. Not tight enough to actually injure, but firm enough to simulate the real threat. Most recruits would struggle, panic, try to pull the arm away with their hands. Some might remember to tuck their chin. Very few would execute a proper technical defense. What happened next took 2.7 seconds. Kira's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. She tucked her chin, raised her near arm in the answer the phone position to protect her airway. Simultaneously, she gripped Sloane's choking arm with both hands, dropped her weight, and turned her hips. The movement broke Sloane's balance. Before Sloane could adjust, Kira continued the rotation, taking Sloane to the ground. In the same fluid motion, she transitioned to mount position, secured Sloane's arms, and applied her own rear naked choke with the hooks in, and everything locked perfectly. The entire sequence was textbook SEAL Level 3 close quarters combat. Advanced technique that took years to master, that required hundreds of hours of mat time to execute with that level of precision and speed. Silence filled the training area. Sloane tapped out. Kira immediately released, and both women stood. Sloane was rubbing her throat, looking at Kira with an expression that was pure shock. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Sloane asked, her voice carrying across the mat to where everyone could hear. "Self-defense classes back home," Kira replied. "Had a good instructor." Gunnery Sergeant Hayes stepped onto the mat, his face showing the carefully controlled expression of someone whose professional expertise had just identified something that shouldn't exist. He was former Force Recon Marine, had trained with SEAL instructors, knew exactly what he just witnessed. "Miss Brennan," he said slowly, "that was not self-defense class technique. That was level 3 MCMAP at minimum. More likely, that was SEAL close quarters combat. The exact counter you use is from Advanced Naval Special Warfare curriculum that is not taught to civilians. So I'm going to ask you one time, where exactly did you learn that technique?" Every eye in the training area was on her. Kira could feel the weight of their attention, the calculations happening behind 24 pairs of eyes. She'd revealed too much, too fast. The mission was already compromised. But lives had been at stake, sort of. Duke in heat exhaustion, the principle of helping teammates. She'd made the choice to help, and that choice had consequences. "I had a good instructor back home," she repeated, "someone who believed in being thorough in their teaching." Hayes studied her for a long moment. In his eyes, she could see him trying to reconcile what he'd witnessed with who she claimed to be. It didn't add up. They both knew it. The question was what he'd do with that knowledge. "Whatever training you've had," he said finally, "it shows. Maybe you can help some of the others with their technique." It was a dismissal and an acknowledgement and a promise all at once. He'd seen what she could do. He'd identified what it meant, and he was choosing, for now, to let it slide. But he'd be watching. They'd all be watching now. As the training day progressed through afternoon sessions, Kira felt the shift in how others treated her. The easy dismissal was gone, replaced by something more complicated. Respect mixed with suspicion. Gratitude mixed with unease. Duke kept stealing glances at her, clearly trying to reconcile the person who'd helped him with the person who just demonstrated combat skills that exceeded anything he'd seen outside of movies. Evening came with exhaustion that came from pushing bodies past normal limits. Recruits dragged themselves to the mess hall, to showers, to bunks. The easy conversations from the night before were gone, replaced by a different kind of speculation. Kira retreated to the women's bathroom, away from the main barracks, needing a moment of privacy. She stood at the sink, looking at herself in the mirror, red hair escaping its bun, freckles dark across her nose and cheeks, green eyes that looked older than 28. She pulled out the dog tags from under her shirt, let them hang visible against her chest. Her tags and pats linked together. "Show them what real strength looks like," she whispered to the empty room. Pat's voice in her memory, sharp and clear. "Don't tell them you're capable. Prove it." But proving it meant revealing it, and revealing it meant the experiment was already changing from observation into something else. Something more complicated and potentially more dangerous. She tucked the tags back under her shirt and headed toward the barracks. Tomorrow would bring water training. Tomorrow she'd have to choose again between maintaining cover and helping teammates. Tomorrow the careful balance would become even harder to sustain. What she didn't know, couldn't know yet, was that at that exact moment, across the base, Master Chief Crawford was sitting in his office staring at his phone. He just received a notification about a photo that was spreading through base social media. A photo taken that morning in the women's locker room. A photo that showed commander-level insignia tags on someone who was supposed to be a recruit. Crawford enlarged the image, studying it closely. The face was partially obscured, but the build matched. The red hair matched. And those tags, those were unmistakably commander rank. He picked up his phone and opened his secure messaging app, typed out a message to Captain Foster. "Need to discuss Recruit Brennan. Have information that suggests her background is not what's been represented. The response came back almost immediately. My office, 0600 tomorrow. Come alone. Crawford set down his phone and looked out his window toward the barracks where Kira was settling in for the night. Something wasn't adding up, something big. And tomorrow morning he was going to find out exactly what was going on. In the barracks, Kira lay in her bunk, aware of the whispered conversations happening around her. She could hear her name repeated over and over. Speculation about who she really was. Theories about special programs or advanced training or mistakes in the recruitment process. None of them were close to the truth, but they were all circling it like sharks around bleeding prey. Sloane's voice drifted from the bunk above. Brennan, you awake? Yes. That move today, the counter and submission, that wasn't self-defense class. I've been through FBI hostage rescue team training. I've trained with the best. That was their level. So who are you really? Kira was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, she said, someone trying to get through training like everyone else. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. Sloane was silent for a moment. Then, okay, but Brennan, I know what I saw. And I'm not the only one. Whatever you're doing here, whatever your real deal is, it's not going to stay secret much longer. Kira closed her eyes and touched the dog tags under her shirt one more time. Sloane was right. The secret was already unraveling. The question was how long she could maintain the facade before it collapsed completely. And what would happen when the truth finally came out? Somewhere in the building a phone buzzed, and another, and another. The photo was spreading faster than Emma Wellington had imagined possible. By morning, it would be everywhere. By morning, the questions would be impossible to avoid. By morning, everything would change. But that was still hours away. For now, in the darkness of the barracks, Kira Brennan lay awake and listened to the whispers. Tomorrow would bring water training. Tomorrow she'd face Chief Donovan and the pool and obstacles designed to break people who weren't prepared. Tomorrow she'd have to choose again between hiding and helping, between mission and morality, between Pat's memory and the promise she'd made at the funeral. Tomorrow everything would begin unraveling. But tonight she could still pretend to be just another recruit, just another small woman in oversized fatigues trying to prove she belonged. The whispers continued long into the night, and somewhere across the base, in offices with secure phones and classified clearances, other conversations were happening. Conversations about Commander Kira Brennan and her real mission, and whether the experiment had already failed before it truly began. The clock ticked toward midnight, toward morning, toward revelations that couldn't be stopped. The water was coming, and with it, the truth. Dawn broke over Naval Special Warfare Training Facility with a kind of crystalline clarity that only came after coastal storms had scrubbed the air clean. The Pacific Ocean stretched endless and cold beyond the base perimeter, waves rolling in with mathematical precision, each one a promise and a threat. Day 3. Water survival training. The place where more recruits failed than any other single phase of the program. Kira stood at her window in the pre-dawn darkness, already dressed, watching the ocean. She'd been awake since 0400, her internal clock no longer capable of sleeping past that threshold after 8 years of military conditioning. Behind her, the barracks was just beginning to stir. Alarm clocks would sound in 12 minutes. Chaos would follow in 13. Her phone sat on the small shelf beside her bunk, screen dark but practically vibrating with unread notifications. The photo had spread through base social media like wildfire through dry brush. 73 shares, 142 comments, speculation ranging from accurate to wildly creative. Some people thought she was undercover CID investigating training protocols. Others suggested she was a general's daughter getting special treatment. A few had guessed closer to the truth, wondering if she was some kind of evaluation officer testing the system. None of them knew about Pat. None of them could know that this was personal as much as professional. that every assumption they made, every bias they revealed, every moment of underestimation was data she collected like evidence at a crime scene. Master Chief Crawford's meeting with Captain Foster was scheduled for 0600. That gave Kira maybe 3 hours before the official questions started. 3 hours to complete water training and demonstrate capability in the one environment where hiding was impossible. Water revealed truth. Pat used to say that. Water showed you who people really were when the comfortable lies of dry land were stripped away. The alarm sounded. Recruits jolted awake. The morning routine began with its now familiar chaos. But Kira noticed the difference immediately. People were watching her. Not with the dismissive amusement of day one, not even with the confused suspicion of day two, with something closer to wary respect mixed with intense curiosity. Sloane was already dressed, sitting on her bunk and studying Kira with the careful attention of someone conducting surveillance. "Big day today," she said quietly. "Water training. This is where a lot of people wash out." "So I've heard. You nervous?" Kira considered the question. Nervous about swimming? About demonstrating skills in an environment where she'd spent thousands of hours? About water that was her natural element, the way air was for birds? No. You should be. The failure rate is over 40%. Even people who think they're strong swimmers discover they're not when you add gear and cold and time pressure. "I'll manage." Sloane shook her head slowly. "You keep saying that. I'll manage. Like you've already done this before and know exactly what's coming." Kira pulled on her boots, lacing them with the practiced efficiency that had become her baseline. "Everyone's done something that prepares them for something else. I spent a lot of time in water growing up." "Yeah," Sloane said, standing and grabbing her own gear. "I'm starting to think a lot of time might be the understatement of the decade." Formation at 0700 brought everyone to the parade ground where Crawford stood with a different energy than previous mornings. His jaw was tight. His eyes kept finding Kira and then looking away. Whatever he'd learned or suspected, it was eating at him. But he was professional enough to maintain the training schedule regardless of personal confusion. "Today we begin water survival training," he announced, voice carrying across the assembled recruits. "This is where we separate those who merely want to be special operators from those who have the capability to become them. The ocean doesn't care about your motivation. It doesn't care about your family legacy or your determination or your reasons for being here. It cares about your skill, your conditioning, and your ability to function when your body is screaming at you to give up." He paused, letting that sink in. 25 recruits stood at attention, some excited, some nervous, all trying to project confidence they might not actually feel. "Chief Petty Officer Blake Donovan will be running today's evolution. He's been training Navy divers for 15 years. He's seen thousands of candidates. He knows what success looks like and what failure looks like. Listen to him. Follow his instructions. And if you find yourself in trouble, signal immediately. Pride is not worth drowning for." They marched to the Naval Special Warfare Pool Facility, a massive complex that housed an Olympic-sized pool, various water obstacles, and equipment designed to simulate ocean conditions in controlled environment. The smell of chlorine mixed with salt air drifted through open doors. Inside, the water gleamed under industrial lighting, deceptively calm. Chief Donovan stood at the pool's edge, lean and weathered, with the fitness that came from spending your life in water. His eyes were sharp, assessing each recruit as they filed in. When his gaze landed on Kira, something flickered there. Recognition, maybe, or curiosity, hard to tell. "Listen up," Donovan called out, his voice echoing off tile walls. "Water survival consists of 3 phases. Phase 1, treading water for 30 minutes while wearing full gear. That's 40 pounds of weight. The water is 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia onset begins around 20 minutes for most people. You will maintain position in the designated area. You will not touch the walls or bottom. You will not assist each other. If you cannot complete this phase, you're done. No second chances. He walked along the pool's edge, hands clasped behind his back. Phase 2 is underwater navigation. You'll complete a course that includes 6 hoops at varying depths, 3 obstacles, a darkened section with 0 visibility, and object retrieval from 15 feet. You have 10 minutes. If you surface before completing the course, you fail. If you exceed time, you fail. The recruits were very quiet now. Several faces had gone pale. This was significantly more intense than most had anticipated. Phase 3 is rescue scenarios. You'll be paired up. One person simulates a drowning victim. The other executes rescue and recovery. We're looking for proper technique, safety awareness, and the ability to function under pressure. Historical failure rate for the complete package is 42%. Most fail in Phase 1, some in Phase 2. Almost nobody fails Phase 3 because by then, we've already weeded out everyone who doesn't belong. He paused, studying the group. Any questions? Silence, the kind that came from people too nervous to risk drawing attention. Good, gear up. We start in 15 minutes. The supply room adjacent to the pool held wetsuits, weight vests, boots, and gloves. The equipment was well maintained but clearly designed for average-sized males. Kira was handed a wetsuit that was at least 3 sizes too large, sleeves hanging past her fingertips, legs pooling at her feet. "Smallest we have," the supply tech said with an apologetic shrug. "You're going to have to make it work." Cole Bridger, standing nearby in his own gear, laughed. "You gonna swim in your big brother's wetsuit? That thing's got enough extra material to double as a parachute." But his laughter died when he saw Kira's face. Not angry, not embarrassed, just patient. Like she'd heard this exact joke 1,000 times and had long since stopped caring. There was something in that patience that made the joke fall flat, made Cole wish he'd kept his mouth shut. "I'll manage," Kira said, and began rolling the sleeves with practiced efficiency, folding the excess material in ways that minimized drag while maintaining mobility. Her movements were quick, sure, the kind that came from having dealt with imperfect equipment in field conditions where improvisation meant the difference between success and failure. Sloane watched this display while pulling on her own properly fitted wetsuit. "You've done this before," she said quietly, not a question, a statement. Kira didn't respond, just finished her adjustments and moved toward the pool area. Phase 1 began at 0830. 25 recruits entered the water in designated zones, weight vests pulling them down with insistent gravity. The water was cold enough to steal breath, to make muscles tighten, to remind every nervous system that humans were not meant for this environment. "Start your 30 minutes, Donovan called out. "Now." The first 10 minutes were deceptively manageable. Most recruits could tread water for 10 minutes. It was uncomfortable, the weight was challenging, but determination and adrenaline carried them through. Kira maintained her position with minimal effort, using an egg beater kick that was standard for water polo players and special operations swimmers. Her upper body stayed relatively still, conserving energy, while her legs did the work in small, efficient circles. Donovan noticed. He was walking the pool's perimeter, watching everyone, but his eyes kept returning to Kira's position. Her technique was too good, too efficient, too practiced for someone who claimed to be new to military training. Minute 12. The first recruit was pulled out by safety divers. Poor technique, panic setting in, body starting to sink despite frantic efforts. Minute 15. 2 more followed. The weight was relentless. The cold was creeping into muscles, and the reality of 30 minutes was becoming clear. This wasn't a sprint. This was sustained suffering with no relief in sight. Minute 18. Duke Wellington was struggling. His college linebacker build, so advantageous on land, became liability in water. Muscle mass required oxygen, lots of it, and his breathing was becoming labored. His technique was poor, arms doing too much work, legs thrashing inefficiently. His face had gone from pink to red to an alarming shade of pale. Kira was maintaining her position about 10 feet away, treading water like she could do it for hours. She watched Duke's deterioration with professional assessment. He was maybe 3 minutes from needing rescue, maybe less. His head was dipping below the surface for split seconds, his movements becoming spastic rather than controlled. She moved closer, not touching him, not violating the rules, but positioning herself where she could speak quietly without the instructor's hearing. "Duke, listen to me. You're fighting the water. Stop." His eyes found hers, desperate, exhausted. "Can't. Too heavy." Egg beater kick. Watch my legs under the surface. Small circular movements. Alternate legs. Let them do the work. She demonstrated, her lower body visible in the clear water, legs moving in controlled patterns that looked almost lazy, but generated significant lift. Upper body relax. Just balance. Sculling motion with your hands, barely moving. You're wasting energy on big movements. Small and steady wins. Duke tried to copy her technique. His first attempts were clumsy, but gradually his body found the rhythm. His head stopped dipping. His breathing, while still labored, became more controlled. He wasn't going to win any style points, but he was going to survive the next 12 minutes. Minute 22. Vin Castellano was in trouble. His construction worker pride had kept him from asking for help earlier, but now he was paying the price. His technique was falling apart, exhaustion overwhelming determination. He was too far for Kira to reach without obviously swimming across zones, but she raised her voice slightly, enough for him to hear. "Vin, vertical position, stop fighting. Let the water support you. Slow your breathing. Work with it, not against it." His eyes found hers across the water. For a moment, pride warred with survival instinct. Then survival won. He adjusted his position, tried to implement her advice. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Enough to keep his head above water. Enough to make it through the remaining minutes. Minute 30. Donovan's whistle blew. "Time! Exit the pool!" 18 recruits climbed out. 7 had failed. Duke and Vin dragged themselves to the edge, utterly spent but successful. They both looked at Kira with new understanding. She'd saved them. Without touching them, without violating any rules, she'd given them the knowledge they needed to survive. Kira pulled herself out of the water with movements that showed zero fatigue. Her breathing was barely elevated. The 30 minutes might as well have been a warm-up. Donovan watched her exit with eyes that had moved from curiosity to outright suspicion. Nobody was that comfortable in water without extensive training. 10-minute break, Donovan announced. Hydrate, prepare for phase 2. During the break, Duke approached Kira where she sat wringing water from the excess wetsuit material. "You saved my ass in there," he said quietly. "Again, that's twice now. The run yesterday and the water today. You would have figured it out." "No, I wouldn't have. I was maybe 2 minutes from drowning. And you knew exactly what to tell me to fix my technique." He sat beside her, lowering his voice further. "That egg beater kick. That's not something casual swimmers know. That's specialized training. Water polo or military or professional rescue. So which is it?" Kira looked at him steadily. "I spent a lot of time in water growing up." "Yeah, everyone keeps saying that. But I'm starting to think when you say a lot of time, you mean something completely different than the rest of us." Before Kira could respond, Donovan's voice cut across the pool area. Phase 2, underwater navigation. First group, let's move. The course was laid out in the deep end, extending down to 15 feet at its maximum depth. 6 hoops formed a 3-dimensional maze that required navigating different depths and angles. 3 obstacles broke up the straight lines. A wall penetration that required finding and passing through a narrow opening. A cargo net that simulated entanglement hazards, and a pipe crawl barely wide enough for an adult body. The darkened section was achieved with black canvas, creating an underwater tunnel with 0 light penetration. At the end, 3 objects sat on the bottom, only one of which was the correct retrieval target. The rules were simple and unforgiving. Complete the course without surfacing. 10-minute time limit. Any violation meant immediate failure. Cole Bridger went first, his surfer and lifeguard background evident in his comfort with water. He moved through the course with respectable skill, completing it in 6 minutes, 45 seconds. Not bad for someone without military training. Duke went next, barely passing at 9 minutes, 52 seconds. His exhaustion from Phase 1 clearly impacting his performance. Sloan posted 7 minutes, 30 seconds. Solid and efficient. Vin struggled through at 9 minutes, 15 seconds. His poor technique costing him time despite brute determination. 4 recruits failed, surfacing before completion or exceeding the time limit. The pool was claiming its tribute, winnowing the group further. Then Kira's turn. She stood at the pool's edge, adjusting her goggles, rolling her shoulders once to loosen them. Donovan stood beside her with a stopwatch, studying her with the intensity of someone who knew he was about to witness something important. "Ready, Brennan?" "Ready, Chief." "Go." Kira entered the water with barely a splash, her body slicing through the surface and immediately descending to 8 feet where the first hoop waited. What happened next made everyone watching go silent. She moved through water like it was her natural environment, not swimming through it but flowing with it. Her technique was flawless. Combat swimmer stroke, a variant of the frog kick that generated maximum forward movement with minimum effort and splash signature. Her arms stayed close to her body in streamlined position, only extending for course corrections. Her body position was horizontal, reducing drag. Every movement was economical, precise, practiced to the point of automation. First hoop, second, third. She navigated the 3-dimensional maze without hesitation, her spatial awareness perfect despite the distorted underwater perspective. The wall penetration that had stymied 2 recruits, she found the opening immediately and passed through like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The cargo net that had tangled 3 others, she navigated with patient, methodical movements that avoided entanglement entirely. The pipe crawl required exhaling to reduce chest volume and make the tight fit passable. Kira entered without pause, her body adapting instantly to the confined space. She emerged on the other side and immediately descended to 12 feet for the darkened section. This was where most recruits struggled. Zero visibility required navigation by touch alone, maintaining orientation without visual reference, managing the psychological pressure of being blind underwater in a confined space. Kira entered the black canvas tunnel and disappeared from sight. Donovan was watching his stopwatch, but his eyes kept flicking to the darkened section. 2 minutes passed. 2.5. Normal time through this section was around 3 minutes for successful candidates. Kira emerged from the darkness at exactly 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Her navigation perfect, her trajectory taking her directly to the 15-foot bottom where 3 objects waited. A weight plate, a dive ring, and a small waterproof container marked with reflective tape. She reached for the container without hesitation, the correct target, and pushed off the bottom in a controlled ascent. She surfaced at 3 minutes, 47 seconds, total elapsed time. The pool area was completely silent. Donovan stared at his stopwatch like it had personally offended him. 3 minutes, 47 seconds. That wasn't just good, that was exceptional. That was faster than some of his instructor cadre. That was SEAL-level performance. Kira swam to the edge and pulled herself out, water streaming from the oversized wetsuit. Her breathing was barely elevated. She could have done it again immediately without rest. Everyone watching knew it. Donovan approached her slowly, his face showing carefully controlled confusion and suspicion. "Brennan, get over here." Kira walked to where he stood, water pooling at her feet. Around the pool, 18 recruits watched with wide eyes and whispered speculation. This was beyond impressive. This was proof of something they couldn't quite name, but definitely recognized. "Where exactly did you learn to swim like that?" Donovan asked, his voice carrying authority and demand. I grew up on the California coast, Chief, spent every summer free diving and surfing. That wasn't recreational diving technique, that was combat swimmer stroke. That's military. Specifically, that's naval special warfare. The way you move through that course, your breath hold of 2 minutes 40 seconds, your navigation in zero visibility, those aren't skills recreational divers possess. Kira met his gaze steadily, saying nothing. The silence stretched between them, tension building like pressure in a diving bell. Before Donovan could push further, a new voice cut across the pool area. Chief, a word. Senior Chief Daniel McAllister stood in the doorway, 68 years old but still carrying himself like the warrior he'd been for 3 decades. His presence commanded immediate attention. Donovan snapped to attention instinctively, old habits from when McAllister had been active duty and Donovan had been a junior enlisted sailor. Begging your pardon, Senior Chief, but I'm in the middle of evaluating candidates. I can see that, and I can also see you're about to ask questions that have complicated answers. Walk with me for a moment. Donovan hesitated, clearly torn between his duty to evaluate recruits and his respect for McAllister's seniority and reputation. Finally, he nodded. 5-minute break. Stay hydrated. As the 2 men walked away, heads together in quiet conversation, Sloan moved to Kira's side. Okay, that was not normal human performance. That was professional level, Olympic level, or what? Or military level, special operations military level. And McAllister just intervened before Donovan could push you on it, which suggests he knows something we don't. Kira wrung water from her wetsuit sleeves, not responding. You know what I think? Sloan continued. I think you're not really a recruit. I think you're here evaluating us, or the program, or something else entirely. And I think whatever your real purpose is, it's got official backing high enough that senior chiefs intervene when people start asking the wrong questions. That's a lot of thinking. I'm a trained investigator. It's what I do. And I'm telling you right now, Brennan, your cover is blown. Maybe not officially, but everyone here knows you're not what you claim to be. Across the pool, Duke and Vin were having a similar conversation in lower voices. Cole stood alone, his expression distant and troubled. He was remembering his brother Daniel, remembering the stories about SEAL training, remembering the instructors who'd been kind enough to explain what had really happened. And he was looking at Kira with growing realization that she moved exactly like those instructors had moved. Exactly like the warriors his brother had aspired to become. Donovan returned with McAllister, his face showing frustration born from being told to drop a line of inquiry he desperately wanted to pursue. But when McAllister suggested something, it wasn't really a suggestion. It was an order wrapped in the velvet glove of seniority and respect. Phase 3, Donovan announced, his voice tight. Rescue scenarios, partner up. The rescue drill was straightforward in concept, brutal in execution. One person would simulate a drowning victim, exhibiting the panic, poor judgment, and dangerous behavior that characterize real drowning situations. The other would approach, secure, and recover them using proper technique that ensured both people's safety. Then they'd switch roles. Kira was paired with Vin, largely because the size difference made for an interesting test. Vin would be the first victim, and his weight advantage, his construction worker strength, his ability to thrash and grab made him a legitimate challenge. If she could handle him, she could handle anyone. They entered the water at opposite ends of the designated area. Donovan gave the signal. Vin began simulating panic, thrashing, gasping, arms windmilling in the universal signal of someone drowning. His acting was good, but there was an undertone of real fear. He'd nearly drowned during the treading exercise, and the memory was fresh enough to add authenticity to his performance. Kira approached from behind, the cardinal rule of water rescue. Never let a panicking victim grab you face to face. Their desperate strength could pull you under. She moved with fluid efficiency, reaching Vin and immediately wrapping her arm across his chest, in a cross-chest carry that pinned his arms while keeping his head above water. Then, committed to the simulation, tried to grab at her, tried to climb on top of her the way drowning victims did. But Kira's positioning was perfect. Every time he tried to grab, she adjusted, maintaining control without fighting him. Her voice was calm, steady, cutting through his simulated panic. "I've got you. Stop fighting me. I will not let you go. Trust me. Breathe." The words, the tone, the absolute certainty in her voice cut through even Vin's committed acting. He stopped thrashing, felt her grip, solid and unbreakable, despite the 100-pound weight difference. Felt himself being towed toward the pool edge with smooth, powerful strokes that barely disturbed the water's surface. At the edge, she helped him out with technique that protected his injured arm scenario, maintained cervical spine stability for his head injury scenario, and demonstrated textbook-perfect victim management from approach to recovery. Donovan watched all of this with his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. "Switch," he called out. Now Vin would rescue Kira. This should have been easy. She was small, couldn't generate much resistance, wouldn't pose real threat to someone his size. Except when Vin approached her simulated drowning, something strange happened. Kira's acting was terrifyingly good. She simulated panic with the authenticity of someone who'd witnessed real drowning, who'd pulled real victims from real water. She grabbed at Vin with desperate strength that seemed impossible from her frame. She tried to climb on top of him exactly like drowning victims did. And Vin, for all his size and strength, struggled. Not because she was overpowering him, but because her simulation was so realistic that his training brain engaged fully, and he realized he was making mistakes. His approach angle was wrong. His grab was wrong. His body position was wrong. And Kira, even while simulating a panicking victim, was somehow teaching him through the authenticity of her performance. By the time he got her to the edge, Vin was breathing hard, not from exertion, but from the realization that he'd just been schooled. Kira climbed out, no longer simulating anything, and looked at Donovan. "That was educational," Vin said quietly to no one in particular. "She just taught me more about rescue technique while pretending to drown than I learned in the entire briefing." Phase 3 continued through the remaining pairs. Most performed adequately. A few struggled enough to require additional training. None came close to Kira's demonstration of technique that was clearly professional-level rescue swimmer capability. By 1100 hours, day 3 of water training was complete. 15 recruits remained from the original 25. 10 had failed, most in Phase 1, a few in Phase 2, none in Phase 3, because by then the weak ones were already gone. The survivors were exhausted, humbled, and acutely aware that they'd witnessed something extraordinary in Kira's performance. Donovan gathered them at the pool's edge for debrief. His eyes kept finding Kira, suspicion and confusion warring on his weathered face. "Today's performance showed me who belongs here and who doesn't. Those of you still standing have demonstrated basic water competency. But don't get comfortable. This was entry level. Advanced water training will make today look like a warm bath." He paused, clearly struggling with something. "I will say that some performances today exceeded basic competency. Some performances today demonstrated capability that typically requires years of specialized training. I'm not going to name names, but everyone here knows what they saw." Every eye turned to Kira. She stood dripping in her oversized wetsuit, face neutral, giving nothing away. "Dismissed. Lunch at 1200. This afternoon we have academic sessions on emergency medicine and tactical communications. Tomorrow we're back in the water. Get rest. You'll need it." As the group dispersed toward the changing rooms, Duke fell into step beside Kira. "I need to say something." "Okay. You saved my life in there, and Vin's, and probably others who won't admit it. That's twice now you've helped me when you didn't have to, when it probably worked against your own interests or performance scores. So thank you. Whatever else is going on, Whatever you're really doing here, thank you for giving a damn about us." Before Kira could respond, they were interrupted by a sharp voice from across the pool deck. "Brennan, Candidate Brennan, front and center, now." Master Chief Crawford stood in the doorway, his face showing the expression of someone who just had a very uncomfortable conversation with superior officers. Behind him, visible through the window of the administrative office, Captain Diana Foster could be seen on the phone. Kira's stomach dropped. This was it. The confrontation she'd been expecting since the photo went viral. The official reckoning. She walked across the deck, water still dripping from her wetsuit, aware of every eye following her. When she reached Crawford, he gestured sharply toward the office. Inside, "Admiral Richardson wants to speak with you." The office was small, functional, dominated by a desk and a secure video screen currently showing Admiral Thomas Richardson. The Admiral was 62, gray-haired, with the weathered competence of someone who'd spent 40 years making hard decisions. Behind him, visible but not directly in frame, was Senior Chief McAllister. "Commander Brennan," Richardson said, and the use of her real rank in front of Crawford made the Master Chief's jaw actually drop. "We have a situation." "Yes, sir." "Your cover is completely compromised. A photo taken this morning in the women's locker room has been circulating on base social media for 9 hours. It clearly shows commander-level insignia tag. Combined with your performance over the past 3 days, speculation is rampant. Some people think you're CID investigating the program. Others think you're evaluating instructors. A few have gotten close to the truth." Crawford found his voice. "Commander? Sir, I don't understand. Brennan is listed as a recruit candidate." "Master Chief Crawford, Commander Kira Brennan is a Navy SEAL with 8 years of service. She holds the rank of Lieutenant Commander, 04. She is here conducting an evaluation of training protocols, specifically examining whether superior capability is recognized regardless of initial appearance and preconceptions." The color drained from Crawford's face. 8 years as a SEAL, commander rank. He'd been treating her like a lost civilian who'd wandered onto the base by mistake, and she'd been evaluating him the entire time. "The question now," Richardson continued, "is how we proceed. Commander Brennan, your official evaluation mission is compromised. However, Senior Chief McAllister has suggested an alternative approach." McAllister moved into frame. "Admiral, if I may, these recruits have been training alongside Commander Brennan for 3 days. They've witnessed her capability. They've received her help. They formed bonds with someone they believed was a peer. The revelation of her true identity and mission could provide valuable data on how personnel respond when their assumptions are challenged. How they handle the cognitive dissonance of discovering that someone they underestimated is actually far above them in capability and rank." Richardson nodded slowly. "Commander Brennan, your thoughts?" Kira was quiet for a moment, thinking through implications. "Sir, the recruits deserve honesty. They've trusted me as a peer. Revealing the deception could damage that trust irreparably. But continuing the lie after it's been exposed would be worse. I recommend full disclosure. Tell them who I am, why I'm here, and give them the choice whether to continue training with me as an embedded mentor or request my removal from their cohort." "You'd risk your entire evaluation on their choice?" "Sir, the evaluation is already compromised, but perhaps there's value in evaluating how they respond to truth after deception. That's as much a test of character as anything we put them through physically." Richardson smiled slightly. "Well said. Master Chief Crawford, your opinion?" Crawford was still processing, his worldview actively recalibrating. "Sir, if Commander Brennan has been evaluating my program, I need to know what deficiencies she's identified so I can correct them." "Actually, Master Chief, Commander Brennan's preliminary notes indicate your program is sound. The deficiencies aren't in your curriculum. They're an unconscious bias that affects initial assessment of capability." You assumed Commander Brennan wasn't qualified based on her appearance. That's not a failure of character, it's a failure of training to recognize that capability comes in many forms. Crawford's face showed pain at that accurate assessment. Yes, sir, I did assume, and I was completely wrong. Which is why this evaluation matters. We're not trying to punish anyone for bias. We're trying to understand it so we can mitigate it. Commander Brennan, you'll proceed with full disclosure to the recruits. Master Chief Crawford will support this process. We'll reconvene in 72 hours to assess how the situation develops. Clear? Clear, sir. Dismissed. The screen went dark. Kira and Crawford stood in the office, silence stretching between them. Finally, Crawford spoke. Commander, I apologize. I made assumptions about your capability based on nothing but appearance. That was wrong, unprofessional, and I'm ashamed it took 3 days of exceptional performance for me to even question those assumptions. Master Chief, you're not alone. That's why I'm here, not to judge individuals, but to understand a system that allows bias to persist, even among well-meaning professionals. Still, I'm sorry, and for what it's worth, ma'am, your performance has been the most impressive I've seen in 27 years of running candidates through this program. Thank you, Master Chief. Now we need to figure out how to tell the others. But before they could plan that conversation, a sharp knock on the door interrupted them. Captain Foster entered without waiting for permission, her face showing unusual strain. Admiral Richardson just received an emergency call. There's a real-world situation developing. Civilian fishing vessel capsized approximately 1.8 miles offshore. 4 people aboard, 2 visible on debris, 2 missing, presumed trapped under the hull. Coast Guard is responding, but they're 25 minutes out. Weather is deteriorating. Seas are 6 to 8 feet, water temperature 58 degrees. Time is critical. Crawford's face went pale. That's inside our training area. We have assets closer than Coast Guard. Yes, which is any other qualified swimmers should volunteer as support. Crawford was already moving. I'll get Chief Donovan. We'll need safety divers, medical standby, communications. How long do we have? 20 minutes to be on water. Coast Guard estimates the trapped victims have maybe 30 minutes of air, probably less. Foster looked at Kira. Commander, this is it. The moment your mission either succeeds or fails, you'll be operating at full capability in front of your entire recruit cohort. They'll see exactly what a SEAL commander can do, and then they'll know the truth. All of it. Are you prepared for that? Kira touched the dog tags under her wetsuit. Hers and Pat's, linked together. Pat's voice in her memory, clear as the day she died. The mission matters, Kira, but individual lives matter more. Always. When you have to choose, choose life. Yes, ma'am, I'm prepared. Let's save some people. The call went out across the facility. They'd been pulled from lunch by the emergency call, told to stand by in case additional support was needed. Now they watched as professional military personnel prepared for real-world rescue with the efficiency of years of training. Then they saw Kira emerge from the equipment room. But not the Kira they knew. This Kira wore a properly fitted rescue suit. This Kira carried gear with the unconscious competence of long familiarity. This Kira moved with command presence that turned heads and straightened spines. Donovan saw her and immediately began briefing. Commander, conditions are deteriorating. Swells are building. Water temperature is hypothermic. 2 victims visible, both showing signs of exhaustion and cold. 2 victims missing, presumed under the capsized hull. Rules of engagement are rescue and recovery. Your call on scene for tactical decisions. Understood, Chief. Who's my team? You, me, 2 safety divers, medical tech, and boat crew. We'll have recruits standing by on shore in case we need additional support for victim recovery. Good, let's move. As Kira walked toward the boat, she passed her recruit cohort. Their faces showed confusion, shock, and growing realization. Duke's eyes were wide. Sloane's expression showed vindication mixed with something like awe, then looked like someone had just explained a magic trick that made less sense after the explanation. Cole was staring at her with an intensity that suggested he was seeing someone he'd lost. "Brennan," Duke called out, "what the hell is going on?" Kira stopped, turned to face them. For a moment she considered staying silent, letting them figure it out. But these were good people. They deserved truth. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Kira Brennan. I'm a Navy SEAL. I've been evaluating training protocols, and right now 4 people are dying a mile offshore. Questions later, lives now." She turned and boarded the boat, leaving 15 stunned recruits standing on the dock, watching as the vessel pulled away into increasingly rough seas. Watching as the tiny woman they'd underestimated prepared to do something most of them couldn't imagine attempting. The boat cut through growing swells, engine roaring at full throttle. Radio chatter filled the air with updates from Coast Guard, weather reports, victim status. Kira stood at the bow, eyes on the horizon, already running tactical assessments in her mind. 2 victims visible meant straightforward rescue. Get flotation on them, recover a boat, treat for hypothermia, standard procedure. But 2 victims trapped under a capsized hull, that was different. A teenage boy and a middle-aged man. Both showed clear signs of hypothermia and exhaustion. "I've got the visible victims," Kira told Donovan. "You coordinate boat positioning and victim recovery. Once they're secure, I'm going under the hull for the missing 2. "Commander, that's extremely dangerous. We should wait for Coast Guard specialized dive team." "They're 20 minutes out. Trapped victims probably don't have 20 minutes. I'm going in." Donovan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Your call, ma'am. Be safe." Kira entered the water like she'd been born there. The 58-degree cold was sharp but manageable. She trained in worse. Arctic operations in Norway, cold water survival in Alaska, Hell Week with water temperature in the 50s. This was uncomfortable, not impossible. She reached the first victim, the middle-aged man, in under 2 minutes. He was barely conscious, hypothermic, lips blue, eyes unfocused. She secured a flotation collar around him using cross-chest carry, protecting his airway, keeping his head above water despite the swells. "I've got you," she said clearly. "Stay with me. You're going to be okay." She signaled the boat, which maneuvered close for pickup. Hands reached down, pulling the man to safety. Medical tech immediately began hypothermia treatment. Kira swam for the second victim, the teenage boy. He was in better physical condition, but panicking as waves washed over him repeatedly. Classic drowning victim behavior, desperate and dangerous. She approached from behind, standard protocol, and wrapped her arm around him before he could grab at her. "Stop fighting," she commanded, her voice cutting through his panic. "I have you. Trust me. Breathe." The authority in her voice, the solid grip, the absolute certainty cut through his terror. He stopped thrashing, let her tow him toward the boat. Once both visible victims were secured, all eyes turned to the capsized hull. Under there, 2 people were running out of time. Air pockets were depleting. Water was rising in the trapped cabin spaces. Hypothermia was setting in. Every minute decreased their chances of survival. "I'm going in," Kira said, and before Donovan could respond, she took 3 deep breaths and dove. Under the capsized boat was a nightmare of darkness, debris, and disorientation. The world was upside down, normal references were gone, and navigation required touch and spatial awareness, and the kind of training most people never received. Kira moved through it with methodical precision, hands feeling structure, mind building a 3-dimensional map, body conserving oxygen while maintaining situational awareness. She found the first air pocket near what had been the helm station. 2 people. A woman in her 40s with an obviously broken arm, face tight with pain. An elderly man in his 70s with a head injury, blood mixing with water, eyes unfocused and confused. Getting them out would require multiple dives. The woman first because she was conscious and could follow instructions. Kira surfaced, explained the situation to Donovan, grabbed additional flotation equipment, and dove again. 3 dives total, 18 minutes of work in darkness and cold and danger. Each dive requiring breath holds that pushed her limits, navigation that demanded perfection, and victim handling that couldn't afford mistakes. 18 minutes where 15 people on a dock watched through binoculars and slowly understood exactly what kind of person they'd been training alongside. When Kira surfaced for the final time with the elderly man secured and stable, the Coast Guard helicopter was just arriving. All 4 victims were alive, hypothermic, injured, traumatized, but alive. The boat crew was silent, stunned by what they'd witnessed. Donovan was staring at Kira with undisguised awe. "Commander," he said quietly, "that was the most impressive rescue operation I've ever witnessed, and I've been doing this for 15 years. Kira was breathing hard now, adrenaline fading, cold setting in, exhaustion creeping through muscles that had been pushed hard. "Just doing the job, Chief." "No, ma'am, that was beyond the job. That was exceptional. That was heroic." The boat turned back toward base, victims stabilized, mission complete. And on the dock, 15 recruits waited to demand answers, waited to understand who they'd really been training with, waited to learn the truth that would change everything. The dock was crowded when the rescue boat finally returned. 15 recruits stood at the front, their faces showing everything from confusion to awe as Kira Brennan stepped onto solid ground. Water still dripped from her properly fitted rescue suit, her red hair plastered dark against her skull, but it was her eyes that held their attention. The calm, steady gaze of someone who just pulled 4 people back from death. Duke Wellington was the first to break the silence. "You're a SEAL," not a question, a statement of dawning realization. "An actual Navy SEAL. That's why you move that's why everything—" Kira took a breath, aware that the next words would define everything that followed. Aware that 15 people who'd trusted her as a peer were about to learn they'd been deceived. Aware that the mission, the evaluation, the entire purpose of her presence was hanging on how she handled this moment. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Kira Brennan. I'm a Navy SEAL, 8 years of service. I've been here conducting an evaluation of training protocols, specifically examining whether superior capability is recognized regardless of initial appearance and assumptions. Everything you've witnessed over the past 3 days has been part of that evaluation. I apologize for the deception, but the mission required it." The silence that followed felt like a physical thing, pressing down on everyone present. Then Sloane's voice cut through it, sharp with anger. "We trusted you. I told you personal things about why I left the police force, about the corruption I witnessed, about my reasons for being here. And you were just taking notes? We were research subjects?" The hurt in her voice was genuine, cutting. Kira had anticipated this, had prepared responses, but the reality of facing someone whose trust she'd violated was harder than the preparation suggested. "The help I gave you was real," Kira said, meeting Sloane's eyes directly. "When Duke was in heat exhaustion during the run, when Vin was drowning during the treading exercise, when any of you needed assistance, I helped because I care about your success. That wasn't part of the evaluation. That was being human." "But you were still lying," Duke said, his voice thick with confusion. "Every time we asked who you really were, every time we said your skills didn't match your story, you lied to us." "Yes, I did. Because the evaluation required determining how long it would take for performance to override initial assumptions. How many demonstrations of capability would be needed before you stopped seeing a small woman in oversized fatigues and started seeing a qualified operator? The answer, by the way, is that it took a real-world emergency where lives were at stake. Even after 3 days of exceptional performance, some of you still weren't sure." Vin stepped forward, his construction worker bulk making him seem even larger against Kira's small frame. "You saved my life in that pool. When I was too proud to ask for help, You gave it anyway. You didn't have to do that. It probably worked against your evaluation scores, showing your capability that clearly. So why did you help? Because watching you drown when I could prevent it would have been unconscionable. The mission matters, but individual lives matter more. That's something my mentor taught me, Commander Patricia Aldridge. She was a SEAL, 5'3", looked like somebody's favorite aunt. She could outshoot, outthink, and outlast anyone on her team. 2 years ago, she died in Syria because her team leader dismissed her tactical assessment of a building being rigged with explosives. She was right, he was wrong. And she died pulling 3 men out of the rubble, including the leader who'd ignored her warning. The dock had gone completely silent now. Even the background noise of the base seemed to fade as Kira's words hung in the air. I'm here because Pat's death can't be meaningless. I'm here because unconscious bias costs lives. I'm here because the next woman who goes through this program, the next operator who doesn't fit the expected mold, deserves to be evaluated on capability instead of appearance. You want to be angry at me for deceiving you? Fine, be angry, but understand that your initial assumptions, your jokes about me being lost, your surprise when I demonstrated competence, those are exactly the problems I'm here to document and help fix. Cole had been silent throughout this exchange, his face showing emotions that went deeper than the immediate situation. Now he stepped forward, his voice rough with something between anger and grief. You said you knew my brother, Daniel Bridger. I told you he was my cousin because it hurt too much to admit the truth. He died during Hell Week 3 years ago. They said he quit, that he gave up, that he couldn't handle the pressure. I never believed it. Daniel didn't quit things. So tell me the truth. Tell me what really happened. Kira's expression softened, genuine compassion showing through the professional facade. Cole, I was assigned to training cadre that cycle. I remember Daniel. He was strong, determined, capable. He didn't quit. He had undiagnosed hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition that doesn't show up in standard medical screening. It presented during log PT on day 4 of Hell Week. He collapsed. We had medical on scene within 90 seconds, but the damage was already catastrophic. He died doing what he loved, trying to become something he believed in. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't failure, it was a tragic medical condition that no one knew about until it was too late. Cole's face crumpled. 3 years of anger and confusion and misplaced guilt collapsing under the weight of truth. Sloane moved to support him instinctively, her own anger at Kira momentarily forgotten in the face of Cole's grief. Duke stepped closer too, the group unconsciously forming a protective circle around their teammate. He didn't quit, Cole repeated, his voice breaking. 3 years I've been carrying this, thinking he gave up, thinking I needed to finish what he started to prove our family wasn't weak. And he didn't quit. No, Kira said gently. He didn't quit. He was brave and strong, and his death was a tragedy, not a failure. I'm sorry you had to carry that weight for 3 years. I'm sorry no one told you the truth sooner. The raw emotion of the moment seemed to break something in the group's anger. They were still processing the deception, still dealing with the revelation that someone they'd trained alongside was so far above their level. But Cole's grief and Kira's compassion reminded them that underneath the evaluation and the mission, they were all humans trying to do difficult things for reasons that mattered. Master Chief Crawford stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 27 years in the Navy. Listen up. What you've just learned is classified information regarding an ongoing evaluation. You will not discuss Commander Brennan's identity or mission outside of authorized personnel. You will not post about it on social media. You will not speculate about it with other candidates. Clear? Murmured assents rippled through the group. Crawford continued, You have a choice. Commander Brennan will be continuing her evaluation for the next 2 weeks. You can choose to continue training with her as an embedded mentor and observer, or you can request transfer to a different training cohort. No judgment either way. This is an unprecedented situation, and your comfort and trust matter. You have 12 hours to decide. Dismissed. The recruits began to disperse slowly, talking in low voices, processing the magnitude of what they'd learned. But Duke hung back, approaching Kira with the careful respect of someone who just realized he'd been training alongside a legend. "Commander, I need to know something. When you helped me during the run, when you coached me in the pool, was that genuine, or was that part of the evaluation?" Kira met his eyes steadily. "Duke, your family has a military legacy going back 3 generations. Your grandfather in World War II, your father in the Gulf War. You came here carrying that weight, terrified of being the one who fails the family tradition. When I saw you struggling, I saw someone who had the heart and determination to succeed, but needed technical help to get there. Helping you was genuine. It had nothing to do with the evaluation, and everything to do with the fact that you're a good person trying to do something difficult, and I had knowledge that could help you succeed." Duke's eyes were bright with emotion. "Thank you for that, for seeing something worth helping. My father told me never to join the military, told me it would break me like it broke him. But my grandfather's stories, the sense of purpose and belonging, I wanted that, needed it, and you helped me believe I could actually achieve it. You can achieve it. You already are. The physical skills can be taught. The determination and character you brought with you, those can't be taught. You have what matters most." After Duke left, Sloane approached, her earlier anger tempered but not gone. "I'm still processing this, the deception, but I understand why it was necessary. In Boston PD, I witnessed senior officers protect their own, despite clear misconduct. I left because I couldn't be part of that system anymore. I came here looking for integrity, for a place where capability mattered more than connections. And then I meet you, someone demonstrating exactly that principle through deception." "It's complicated." "Yes, it is. Deception in service of truth is still deception. I won't pretend otherwise. But sometimes the only way to reveal a problem is to create conditions where it manifests clearly. Your performance over the past 3 days has been excellent. Your tactical thinking, your leadership qualities, your ability to read situations and people, those skills will serve you well, regardless of what you decide about continuing with this cohort." Sloane nodded slowly. "I think I'm staying, not because I've forgiven the deception, but because I want to understand what you saw, what you learned, what changes might come from this evaluation. And maybe because training alongside someone at your level is an opportunity I'd be stupid to walk away from." The afternoon wore into evening. The rescued civilians were treated and released. All 4 expected to make full recoveries. The Coast Guard officially credited Commander Brennan with saving 4 lives through exceptional rescue swimmer performance. And in the barracks, 15 recruits tried to process the reality that someone they'd underestimated was actually one of the most qualified operators on the entire base. Kira stood in Admiral Richardson's office at 1800 hours, giving her report on the day's events. Richardson listened without interruption, his weathered face showing the careful neutrality of someone who'd heard thousands of after-action reports and knew how to find the important details in the narrative. "So your cover is completely blown," he said when she finished. "The question is whether that compromises the mission or creates new opportunities for evaluation." "Sir, I believe it creates opportunities. The recruits' reactions to learning the truth will reveal as much about their character as their performance during training. How they handle cognitive dissonance, how they process being wrong about their initial assumptions, how they respond to authority when that authority comes in an unexpected package. Those are all valuable data points." "Agreed. What about the instructors?" Master Chief Crawford admitted his bias directly. "Chief Donovan acknowledged missing clear indicators of my skill level. Both are taking this seriously, not as personal failures, but as systemic issues that need addressing. That's exactly the response we want." Richardson nodded slowly. "There's another complication. Lieutenant Commander James Thornton is arriving tomorrow. He's been assigned to review your evaluation methodology, ostensibly to ensure objectivity and rigor. In reality, he's being sent by people who are uncomfortable with what your evaluation might reveal. Kira felt her stomach drop. Sir, Thornton was on Commander Aldridge's final mission. He was the team leader who dismissed her assessment about the building being rigged. Yes, I'm aware, which is why his assignment here is problematic. He may try to discredit your evaluation to protect his own reputation and decisions. You'll need to maintain absolute professionalism and let your data speak for itself. Can you do that? Yes, sir, but I need to know, is he here to evaluate my methodology or to sabotage it? Richardson's expression hardened. Officially, evaluate. Unofficially, I suspect the latter. But that suspicion isn't proof, and we can't act on it without evidence. You'll treat him with the respect his rank deserves. You'll provide him access to your evaluation data as required, and you'll continue your mission. If he attempts sabotage, document it. Clear? Clear, sir. That evening, the barracks had a different energy than previous nights. The easy camaraderie of shared struggle was complicated now by the revelation of Kira's true identity. Some recruits avoided her. Others sought her out with questions about SEAL training, about combat operations, about what it took to achieve that level of capability. Vin approached her bunk where she was reviewing notes on a tablet. Commander, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why help us? I mean, really, you could have just coasted through the training, documented our performance, written your report. Instead, you put yourself at risk, revealed your capabilities early, compromised your mission to help people who were basically strangers. Why? Kira set down the tablet, considering the question. When I went through BUD/S, there was a moment during Hell Week where I was done, completely spent, ready to ring the bell and quit. An instructor, a female SEAL who was there as an observer, pulled me aside. She didn't give me a pep talk or tell me I could do it. She just said, the only difference between the people who make it and the people who quit is that the people who make it decide to keep going for one more minute. Then another. Then another. You can quit in 1 minute if you still want to, but you can also keep going for one more minute. That instructor was Pat Aldridge. She saved my career that night. So when I see someone struggling with something I can help them with, I help. Because someone helped me when I needed it. Vin was quiet for a moment. I dropped out of high school because teachers told me I wasn't smart enough for college. Spent 15 years proving my worth through physical work, while educated people told me where to dig and what to build. I came here to prove I'm more than a dropout with strong hands. And you, someone with more credentials and capability than anyone I've met, treated me like an equal. Helped me when I was too proud to ask. That means something. You are more than a dropout with strong hands, Vin. You read people better than anyone in this cohort. You understand group dynamics instinctively. You know when someone's struggling before they admit it themselves. That's tactical intelligence, and it's as valuable as any academic degree. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Cole found her later, after lights out, sitting outside the barracks looking at the stars. He sat down beside her without asking permission, both of them silent for a long moment. Thank you, he said finally, for telling me the truth about Daniel, for not letting me carry that weight anymore. You deserve to know. He deserved to be remembered for who he was, not who people assumed he was when he died. Can I ask what he was like? During training? The real Daniel, not the version I built in my head over 3 years of grief. Kira smiled slightly, remembering. He was funny. Used to make jokes during the worst moments of Hell Week. Kept people's spirits up when everything hurt and quitting seemed like the only rational choice. He was strong, not just physically but mentally. When others were breaking down, he stayed steady. And he cared about his teammates, always checking on the guys who were struggling, always offering encouragement. He would have made an excellent SEAL. His death was a tragedy, but his life was something to be proud of. Cole's voice was thick with emotion. That sounds like Daniel, the brother I remember. Thank you for giving him back to me. The real him, not the failure I thought he'd become. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead, each processing their own grief and revelation. Finally, Cole spoke again. I'm staying in the cohort. I want to learn from you. Not just the technical skills, but how you approach things. How you see past surface level to what people really are. Daniel would have wanted me to take that opportunity, to learn from the best, regardless of how unexpected the package. Morning came with the arrival of Lieutenant Commander James Thornton. He was 48 years old, carrying himself with confidence born from 26 years of military service and more combat deployments than most people had years in service. His chest held enough ribbons to stock a craft store. His face showed the weathered competence of someone who'd made hard decisions in hard places. And his eyes held something else. Something that might have been defensiveness, or guilt, or anger at being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Master Chief Crawford met him at the administrative building, providing the standard briefing on facility operations and training schedules. But Kira could see Crawford's discomfort, could read in his body language that he knew exactly why Thornton was really here. The confrontation came at 1000 hours in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and old paperwork. Thornton sat across from Kira, Captain Foster present as observer, and opened his tablet with official evaluation protocols displayed. Commander Brennan, he began, his tone professionally neutral, but with an undercurrent of something sharper. I'm here to review your evaluation methodology to ensure objectivity and scientific rigor. I've read your preliminary notes. Your hypothesis that unconscious bias affects initial capability assessment is interesting but problematic. How so, sir? It assumes that bias is the primary factor rather than legitimate professional assessment based on experience. When an instructor sees a small-frame candidate and expresses concern about their ability to meet physical standards, that's not bias. That's pattern recognition based on years of data showing correlation between body type and performance capability. Kira kept her voice level, professional. Sir, pattern recognition becomes bias when it overrides direct evidence. I demonstrated exceptional capability from day one. Rope climbing technique that was textbook military standard. Combat skills that exceeded basic self-defense. Water performance that matched professional rescue swimmer levels. Yet instructors continued to express surprise and concern despite mounting evidence that my capability exceeded their assumptions. Or they were appropriately skeptical of performance that seemed too good to be true. Healthy skepticism is not bias, Commander. It's due diligence. With respect, sir, healthy skepticism examines evidence and adjusts conclusions accordingly. What I documented was assumptions that persisted despite evidence. That's bias. Thornton's jaw tightened. You're making serious allegations about training staff who have dedicated their careers to producing the best special operators in the world. Allegations that could damage reputations and careers. I'm documenting patterns, sir, not making allegations against individuals. The goal isn't to punish anyone, but to understand how systemic bias operates so we can mitigate it. And you think you're qualified to make these determinations? You've been a SEAL for 8 years. I've been doing this for 26. I've deployed to more combat zones than you've had birthdays. I've made decisions under fire that cost lives and save lives. And you think you can waltz in here with your evaluation protocols and tell us our system is broken? There it was, the real issue, not methodology or scientific rigor, ego and defensiveness, and anger at being told you might be wrong about something fundamental. Captain Foster intervened before Kira could respond. Commander Thornton, Commander Brennan's evaluation was authorized at the highest levels specifically because fresh perspective was needed. Her qualifications are not in question. Her findings will be reviewed by multiple senior officers before any conclusions are drawn. Your role is to ensure methodology is sound, not to defend the existing system against criticism. Thornton turned his glare to Foster. Ma'am, I'm simply pointing out that Commander Brennan's personal history with Commander Aldridge may be affecting her objectivity. This entire evaluation seems designed to vindicate Aldridge's death by proving the system failed her. The temperature in the room dropped by what felt like 20 degrees. Kira's hands, resting on the table, clenched into fists before she consciously relaxed them. When she spoke, her voice was Arctic cold. Sir, Commander Aldridge died because her team leader dismissed her tactical assessment based on gender bias, rather than evaluating the evidence she presented. She was right about the building being rigged. She provided specific intelligence about explosive placement, and she was ignored. Her death doesn't need vindication. It needs to mean something. It needs to result in changes that prevent the next qualified operator from being dismissed because they don't match expected patterns. So you admit this is personal, that you're here to prove a point rather than conduct objective evaluation. Sir, every evaluation is personal to the evaluator. The question is whether personal investment compromises objectivity or enhances motivation to be thorough. My data collection has been systematic, my observations documented in real time, my methodology transparent. If you find flaws in that process, please identify them specifically. But questioning my motivations without addressing my methodology is itself a form of bias. The meeting continued for another hour, Thornton challenging every aspect of Kira's evaluation design, while she defended her choices with data and documentation. By the end, nothing was resolved, but battle lines were clearly drawn. Thornton would be looking for any excuse to discredit her findings, and Kira would need to be absolutely meticulous in her documentation going forward. Training resumed that afternoon with a new complication. Thornton insisted on observing all sessions, ostensibly to evaluate methodology, but practically creating an atmosphere of surveillance and tension. The recruits felt it immediately, their performance becoming more cautious, less natural, affected by the presence of a senior officer who radiated disapproval. During tactical training, Kira was teaching close-quarters combat techniques, demonstrating with Duke as her partner. She'd just shown a complex disarm and control technique when Thornton interrupted. Commander Brennan, is it appropriate to be teaching advanced techniques to candidates who haven't mastered basics? This seems like showboating rather than sound instruction. Every head turned. The recruits looked uncomfortable, caught between respect for Kira and uncertainty about contradicting a senior officer. Kira kept her voice level. Sir, the technique I'm teaching is scalable. The basic principles apply at all skill levels. I'm demonstrating the advanced application, then breaking it down into component skills they can practice at their current level. It's a standard teaching methodology. Standard for whom? I've never seen SEAL instructors teach this way. Then perhaps, sir, you should observe more broadly. This is how Commander Aldridge taught when she was an instructor. Start with the complete picture so students understand the goal, then break it into achievable steps. It's highly effective for visual learners. Thornton's face darkened at the mention of Pat's name. Commander Aldridge's teaching methods were controversial. Not everyone agreed with her approaches. With respect, sir, her students had some of the highest performance scores in SEAL training history. Results speak louder than controversy. The tension in the training area was palpable. Duke looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't figure out how to intervene appropriately. Sloane's expression showed anger at Thornton's interference. Vin looked ready to physically interpose himself between Kira and Thornton, despite the absolute insanity that would represent from a disciplinary standpoint. The standoff was broken by the arrival of Senior Chief McAllister, who moved through the training area with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd earned the right to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. Commander Thornton, he said pleasantly, didn't expect to see you here. Last I heard you were assigned to training command at Little Creek. Senior Chief, I'm here conducting evaluation review, ensuring standards are maintained. I see. Well, since you're here observing, maybe you'd like to demonstrate that disarm technique Commander Brennan was teaching. Show the candidates how it's done by someone with your level of experience. Thornton's face showed the trapped expression of someone who'd just been expertly maneuvered into an uncomfortable position. Declining would suggest he couldn't perform the technique. Accepting meant putting himself in direct comparison with Kira's demonstration. Either way, McAllister had created a situation where Thornton's authority was being challenged by someone whose seniority and reputation made objection impossible. I don't think that's necessary, Senior Chief. I was simply observing instruction methodology, not questioning technical skill. Oh, I insist. These candidates need to see multiple examples of proper technique. Helps them understand variations in body mechanics and approach. Duke, you don't mind being the demonstration partner again, do you? Duke, reading the situation with growing awareness, stepped forward. Happy to help, Senior Chief. Thornton moved onto the mat with obvious reluctance. What followed was instructive for everyone watching. Thornton knew the technique, that was clear, but his execution was mechanical, lacking the fluid efficiency Kira had demonstrated. He got the job done, but it was workmanlike rather than masterful. Competent, but not exceptional. When he finished, McAllister nodded approvingly. Well done, Commander. Now maybe Commander Brennan could demonstrate again so the candidates can compare approaches and find what works best for their body mechanics? Kira stepped forward, and this time she didn't hold back. Her demonstration was a masterclass in efficiency and control. Every movement had purpose, every transition was seamless, every application of force was precisely calibrated. When she finished, the difference between competent and exceptional was visible to everyone present. Thornton's face was rigid with barely controlled anger. He'd been outclassed in front of junior personnel, and everyone knew it. McAllister had orchestrated the entire thing with the precision of someone who'd spent 50 years understanding military politics and personal dynamics. Thank you both, McAllister said cheerfully. Candidates, you've just seen an important lesson. Technical competence is good. Mastery is better. Work toward mastery in everything you do. Dismissed. That evening, Thornton cornered Kira in the hallway outside the administrative offices. His professional mask had slipped, showing the anger and defensiveness beneath. You think you're clever, getting McAllister to fight your battles, making me look incompetent in front of recruits. This is exactly the kind of politics that Commander Aldridge played, using sympathy and victim status to advance her career. Kira's voice was dangerously quiet. Sir, I recommend you stop talking. Right now, before you say something that will require official response. Or what? You'll run to the Admiral? File a complaint? That's what people do when they can't compete on merit. They play politics and cry discrimination. Commander Aldridge competed on merit. She outperformed everyone on her team. She provided accurate, tactical intelligence that would have saved lives if anyone had listened. She died because her team leader was more concerned with maintaining authority than evaluating evidence. Sound familiar? That operation was complicated. There were multiple factors you don't understand because you weren't there. You're right, I wasn't there, but I've read the after-action reports, all of them, including the ones that were classified. Commander Aldridge identified explosive placement with 95% accuracy. She provided photographic evidence. She outlined 3 separate exfil routes that would have avoided the trap. And she was dismissed because accepting her assessment would have meant changing the plan, which would have looked like weakness. So instead, you kept the plan, entered the building, triggered the explosives exactly where she said they'd be, and 3 people nearly died. She did die, pulling you out of the rubble. Thornton's face had gone pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and you know it too. That's why you're here. That's why you're trying to discredit my evaluation. Because if bias cost Pat her life, if institutional failure killed one of our own, then you bear partial responsibility. And that's a weight you'd rather not carry. This conversation is over. Yes, sir, it is. But the evaluation continues, and the data doesn't care about your guilt or your defensiveness or your need to be right. The data just shows what happened and what continues to happen. And eventually, that data will be seen by people who care more about fixing the problem than protecting their reputations. Thornton stormed off, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Kira leaned against the wall, her hands shaking with adrenaline and anger and exhaustion from fighting battles that should never have been necessary. A door opened nearby. Captain Foster stepped out, her expression showing that she'd heard the entire exchange. That was dangerous, Commander. Thornton could file a complaint about insubordination. Yes, ma'am, but someone needed to say it, and I'm the only one who can without ending their career. True, but you're also giving him ammunition to claim your evaluation is personally motivated rather than professionally objective. Ma'am, my evaluation is both. I'm personally invested in making sure Pat's death means something, and I'm professionally committed to conducting rigorous analysis that will withstand any scrutiny. Those two things aren't contradictory, they're complementary. Foster studied her for a long moment. Admiral Richardson wants to see you tomorrow at 0600. He's received preliminary reports from Thornton suggesting your evaluation should be terminated due to methodology concerns. You'll need to defend your work. I can do that, ma'am. I know you can. But Kira, understand that Thornton isn't just one officer with a grudge. He represents a faction that's resistant to change, that sees evaluations like yours as threats rather than opportunities. You're not just fighting him, you're fighting an entire institutional mindset that's been in place for decades. Yes, ma'am, I understand, but someone has to fight it. And I made a promise to Pat, at her funeral, that her death would mean something, that it would lead to changes. I intend to keep that promise. The next morning brought an unexpected development. At 0500, before Kira's scheduled meeting with Admiral Richardson, an emergency call came through. But this time it wasn't another capsized vessel. Two recruits from a different training cohort had gotten separated during night navigation training in the hills behind the base. One had fallen, possible broken leg, immobilized. The other was with him but couldn't carry him out alone. Weather was deteriorating fast, temperature dropping. They had maybe 3 hours before hypothermia became critical in the exposed terrain. Standard search and rescue would take 90 minutes to deploy and navigate the difficult terrain. The lost recruits didn't have 90 minutes. Admiral Richardson made the call. Commander Brennan, I need your tactical assessment. Can your team execute a land-based search and rescue in unfamiliar terrain? Kira ran the calculations. Her recruits had land navigation training. They'd done tactical medicine. They'd operated under pressure during both rescue scenarios. This was different terrain, different challenges, but same fundamental principles. Leadership, teamwork, competence under pressure. Yes, sir, we can do it. You have tactical command. Commander Thornton, you're an observer. If you deploy, you follow Commander Brennan's orders. Non-negotiable. Thornton looked like he'd swallowed something bitter but nodded. There was no time for argument. Lives were at stake. Kira was already moving, grabbing gear, issuing orders with crisp authority. Duke, Sloan, Vin, Cole, full kit, medical supplies, navigation equipment, cold weather gear. We move in 5 minutes. The recruits responded with practiced efficiency, their training holding up under real-world pressure. Duke grabbed the medical pack. Sloan checked navigation equipment. Vin loaded communications gear. Cole prepped cold weather supplies. They moved like a team now, not recruits, but operators trusting each other and their commander. The hills behind the base were rugged terrain, steep grades and loose rock, chaparral and scrub oak making visibility difficult. The lost recruits were somewhere in a 2-square-mile area based on their last known position. Finding them would require systematic search patterns, effective communication, and the ability to operate in challenging conditions. Kira briefed the mission en route. We'll use modified grid search. 2 teams. Duke and Sloan, your Team 1. Vin and Cole, Team 2. I'll coordinate from high ground with line of sight to both teams. Commander Thornton will stay with me as observer. We communicate every 5 minutes. Anyone finds anything, immediate report. Questions? No, ma'am, came the unified response. Good, let's bring them home. The search began at 05:30 in dim, pre-dawn light. The teams moved with careful efficiency, calling out periodically, watching for any sign of the missing recruits. Duke's navigation was flawless, using terrain features and compass work exactly as Kira had taught. Sloane's tactical awareness kept them safe on treacherous slopes. Vin's strength proved valuable when they needed to move heavy debris, blocking a potential path. Cole's experience reading natural terrain helped predict likely routes the lost recruits might have taken. 40 minutes into the search, Cole's voice crackled over the radio. Commander, we've got something. Clothing fibers on a rock outcrop. Fresh. They came through here. Good work. Track it. Everyone converge on Team 2's position. The trail led them down a steep ravine to a small clearing where they found the 2 missing recruits. One was conscious but hypothermic, shivering uncontrollably. The other, the one with the leg injury, was semi-conscious, his broken tibia visible through torn fatigues, hypothermia setting in fast. Duke immediately began medical treatment, applying exactly what Kira had taught during their tactical medicine sessions. Tourniquet above the break to control bleeding, splint to stabilize the leg, thermal blankets for both patients, oral rehydration for the conscious one. Good work, Duke, Kira said, arriving at the scene. Sloan, call in medevac. Give them exact coordinates. Vin, Cole, prep a landing zone. Clear that flat area, mark it with chem lights. The team executed flawlessly. Sloan's radio communication was textbook clear. Vin and Cole cleared the landing zone in under 5 minutes. Duke maintained patient care with calm competence that would have made any combat medic proud. The helicopter arrived at 06:20. Both patients were evacuated, treated, and would make full recoveries. The entire operation, from initial call to successful extraction, took 75 minutes. Professional performance under real-world pressure in unfamiliar terrain. Back at base, Admiral Richardson was waiting with Thornton beside him. His expression showed satisfaction mixed with something deeper. Recognition, maybe, or vindication of a decision to trust Kira's assessment of her team's readiness. Well done, Commander. Your team performed excellently under pressure. Different scenario, different terrain, same result. Professional competence. Thank you, sir. The recruits exceeded expectations. Their training held up when it mattered. Thornton looked like he wanted to object, to find some flaw in the operation. But the results spoke for themselves. 2 more lives saved. 0 mistakes. Textbook professional performance from people who weren't supposed to be ready for real operations. But they were ready. Because they'd been trained well, led effectively, and given the opportunity to prove their capability. Commander Thornton, Richardson said quietly, you've been observing Commander Brennan's evaluation methods for several days now. You've seen her teach, you've seen her lead, you've watched her team perform under pressure in multiple scenarios. Do you still maintain that her methodology is flawed? Thornton was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion that might have been anger or might have been something else. Sir, I need to speak with Commander Brennan privately. Richardson studied him carefully, then nodded. My office, 1 hour, both of you. The hour was spent in administrative tasks, writing reports, documenting the operation, debriefing the recruits. But the pending conversation with Thornton hung over everything like a storm cloud waiting to break. When the hour arrived, Kira entered Richardson's office to find Thornton already there, standing by the window looking out at the Pacific. His shoulders were tight, his posture rigid, everything about his body language suggesting internal struggle. Sit down, both of you, Richardson said. Commander Thornton has something to say. Thornton turned from the window, and Kira saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Not anger, not defensiveness, pain. Raw, unprocessed grief that had been buried under layers of justification and ego protection. Commander Brennan, he began, his voice carefully controlled. I need to say something I should have said 2 years ago. Commander Aldridge was right. About the building, about the explosives, about everything. I didn't listen because accepting her assessment would have meant changing the operational plan, which would have looked like weakness. Like I was letting a female officer override my command decisions. My ego was more important than the evidence, and she died because of it. The office was silent except for distant ocean sounds filtering through the window. Kira said nothing, letting Thornton continue. I've spent 2 years justifying that decision, telling myself it was complicated, that there were factors she didn't understand, that her assessment was only one data point among many. But that's all rationalization. The truth is, I dismissed her because she was female, and I was male, and I couldn't handle the idea that she might know better than me. That bias cost her life, and I've been carrying that guilt ever since. His voice broke slightly on the last sentence. When I heard about your evaluation, I came here to discredit it. Because if bias is systemic, if institutional failure killed Pat, then I bear responsibility beyond just bad tactical decisions. I bear responsibility for being part of a culture that creates and perpetuates that bias. And that's a weight I'd rather not carry. But, he continued, his voice stronger now, watching you over the past several days, watching your recruits perform under real pressure in multiple scenarios, I can't deny the evidence. Your teaching methods work. Your leadership style is effective. Your team trusts you and performs at high levels despite being early in training. Everything Pat believed about capability transcending appearance and gender, you're proving it. And I need to stop fighting that truth and start supporting it. He looked directly at Kira. I'm sorry. To you, to Pat's memory, to everyone I've dismissed or underestimated because of bias I didn't even recognize I had. I can't change the past, but I can do better going forward. I can support your evaluation instead of fighting it. I can help implement whatever changes come from your findings. I can honor Pat by being better than I was. Kira felt tears threatening and forced them back. This wasn't the time. Not in front of the Admiral. Not when she needed to maintain professional composure. But Thornton's words, his genuine contrition, his willingness to admit fault and commit to change, that was more than she'd expected, more than she'd hoped for. Commander Thornton, she said quietly, Pat would want you to learn from this, not to carry guilt that paralyzes you, but to transform that pain into positive change, to help ensure her death leads to a better system. That's how we honor people we've lost, by being better because of them. Thornton nodded, not trusting his voice. Richardson spoke into the heavy silence. The path forward is clear. Commander Thornton, you'll assist Commander Brennan with the remainder of her evaluation. Your experience and perspective will strengthen her findings, not undermine them. Commander Brennan, you'll continue your work with full institutional support. The preliminary data is compelling. The final report will receive serious attention at the highest levels. Over the next 10 days, something remarkable happened. Thornton became an advocate rather than antagonist. He worked with Kira to refine methodology, to strengthen data collection, to ensure findings would withstand any scrutiny. He interviewed instructors about their assessment processes, documenting their honest reflections on bias with a humility that came from having confronted his own failures. He shared his own journey in painful detail, creating a narrative of transformation that would become central to the final recommendations. Together, they developed a comprehensive framework for bias mitigation in training protocols. Not punitive measures, but constructive improvements. Blind assessment periods where evaluators saw performance data without physical descriptors. Equipment properly fitted from day one, regardless of body type. Evaluation rubrics emphasizing technical proficiency over raw physical power. Instructor training that explicitly addressed unconscious bias and pattern recognition fallacies. The changes rippled outward during those 10 days. Crawford implemented new protocols immediately, eager to be part of the solution rather than defending the old system. Every recruit now received properly fitted equipment from day one. Physical assessments were conducted with evaluators seeing only performance metrics until after scoring. The obstacle course instructor who'd questioned Kira's rope climbing technique volunteered to teach a new class on recognizing professional level technique regardless of source. Chief Donovan redesigned water training evaluation rubrics. Speed and efficiency now counted more than raw power. Technical skill trumped physical appearance. He personally mentored 3 female recruits through the program over those 10 days, using lessons he'd learned from watching Kira operate. The recruits noticed the transformation. Duke commented that Thornton seemed different, more open, more willing to listen and learn. Sloan observed that his feedback during training sessions shifted from critical to constructive, focused on improvement rather than finding fault. Even Vin, who'd been ready to physically defend Kira against Thornton's initial interference, admitted the commander seemed genuinely committed to positive change. Graduation came on day 15 with full ceremony. The parade ground was packed. Families filled the stands. Flags snapped in the ocean breeze. The remaining 15 recruits stood in formation, transformed from the uncertain civilians who'd arrived 2 weeks earlier into the beginning of warriors. Admiral Richardson took the podium, his weathered face showing the gravitas of 4 decades in service. His voice carried across the assembled crowd with the weight of earned authority. This training class, he began, experienced something unprecedented. They trained alongside someone who could have outshone them at every turn. Someone who possessed skills and experience far beyond what anyone expected. Someone who challenged every assumption about what capability looks like. Instead of using that advantage to make them look inadequate, Commander Kira Brennan lifted them up. She demonstrated that real leadership isn't about proving you're the best. It's about making everyone around you better. He paused, letting that sink in. 15 graduates stood a little straighter. Master Chief Crawford has admitted his initial bias and implemented immediate corrections to ensure it doesn't continue. Chief Donovan has acknowledged missing obvious capability indicators and redesigned assessment protocols to focus on performance rather than appearance. Commander Thornton has courageously shared his experience with how bias led to tragic consequences and his commitment to ensuring it never happens again. Their honesty, their willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, that's the kind of character that makes positive change possible. Richardson continued, the preliminary findings from Commander Brennan's evaluation are compelling. Initial capability assessments showed 47% bias based on appearance. This bias persisted an average of 3.2 days despite contrary evidence. When evaluators used blind assessment protocols, accuracy improved by 61%. Teams with diverse physical profiles but high technical competence outperformed homogeneous teams by 23% in complex operations. The data is clear. Change is necessary, and change is coming. The ceremony continued with the presentation of a new award, the Patricia Aldridge Leadership Award, given to graduates who demonstrate exceptional performance combined with commitment to team success. Admiral Richardson held up a commemorative coin, its surface showing the seal trident on one side and Pat's motto on the other, "Strength serves." The first recipients of the Patricia Aldridge Leadership Award are Duke Wellington, Sloan Garrett, Vin Castellano, and Cole Bridger. Each stepped forward to receive their coin. Each shook hands with the Admiral, with Crawford, with Donovan, and finally with Kira. Each coin carried weight beyond its metal, a reminder that capability came in unexpected forms, that bias could be overcome through evidence and honesty, that the best leaders were those who lifted others up. After the ceremony, individual conversations provided closure and new beginnings. Duke Wellington, commissioned as ensign, accepted to BUD/S training with a start date 3 months away. He approached Kira with the bearing of someone who'd found his path forward. "Commander, I'm carrying this coin through BUD/S and beyond. When I want to quit, when I think I can't continue, I'll remember that a 5'2" SEAL commander saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Thank you for that, for believing before I could." Sloan Garrett, selected for tactical intelligence work with Joint Special Operations Command, had found her integrity in a new institution. "Boston PD taught me what I didn't want to be part of. You taught me what I could aspire to. I'm taking your methodology with me, documenting bias where I find it, working to change systems from the inside. Someone has to do it. Might as well be us." Vin Castellano, recruited for Special Operations Recruiting Command, would now travel the country identifying overlooked talent. "I see them now, Commander, the ones everyone else misses. The high school dropout working construction who has tactical intelligence others can't teach. The small-framed candidate dismissed because they don't look the part. I see them because someone saw me. I'll make sure they get their shot." Cole Bridger, assigned as water survival instructor at Coronado, would teach in the same pool where Kira had demonstrated technique that seemed impossible for her size. "I tell them about you," he said quietly. "Not your rank or your missions. Just that the best water operator I ever saw was 5'2" and looked like she belonged in high school. And then I show them technique that proves physics doesn't care about appearance. Daniel would have loved that lesson. I'm teaching it for him." Senior Chief McAllister pulled Kira aside for a final conversation. From his pocket, he produced something worn smooth by decades of handling. Pat's challenge coin from 1994, the year she'd completed BUD/S, the year she'd begun proving that capability came in forms the Navy hadn't expected. She carried this through BUD/S, through every deployment, through everything, McAllister said quietly. Held it when she was scared, touched it when she needed strength, used it to remind herself why she did this work. She'd want you to have it now, not to keep forever, but to pass forward when your time comes. That's how we honor those we've lost, by continuing the work they started, by being better because of them. Kira held the coin, feeling its weight, imagining Pat's hands holding this same piece of metal through training and combat and everything between. One side showed the date 1994 and Pat's name. The other side, worn nearly smooth by 30 years of touch, showed a hand reaching down to pull another hand up. No words, just the image, strength serving. Thank you, Senior Chief, for believing in Pat, for recognizing what I was doing here, for protecting the mission when it needed protection. That's what mentors do. Pat mentored me when I was coming up in the 80s, teaching me that real strength had nothing to do with size. I helped you when you needed it. You mentored those 4 recruits who just graduated. The line continues. One person at a time, one generation teaching the next, each one building on what came before. That's how change happens. Not dramatic revolution, quiet evolution. Better people making better choices, making better systems. Emma Wellington, Duke's sister who'd inadvertently started the revelation with a photo, sat in the graduation audience beside her parents. Admiral Richardson had called her personally after the incident, explaining that her accidental photo hadn't destroyed a mission, but had actually accelerated important changes. Sometimes, he'd told her, truth finds its way out despite our best efforts to control it. Your photo didn't destroy a mission, it fulfilled one. Now she watched Duke receive his commission and his Patricia Aldridge coin, understanding that she'd witnessed something historic. Not because she'd taken a photo, but because she'd been present when someone chose truth over comfort. When a system chose to examine itself honestly rather than defend itself blindly. 6 months later, Kira Brennan was back in active SEAL operations, leading a team through a high-value target extraction somewhere in the Middle East that would never be officially acknowledged. The operation involved complex terrain, multiple enemy positions, and civilians requiring protection during exfiltration. The team was mixed gender, multiple operators, and capability was the only thing that mattered. Kira's commands were respected immediately. No hesitation, no questions based on appearance, just professional operators working together, each bringing their particular strengths to solve the tactical problem at hand. The operation concluded successfully at 0300 local time. 0 casualties among team or civilians. Targets secured for intelligence exploitation. Mission accomplished with the efficiency that came from teams that trusted each other completely. As the helicopter lifted off into the darkness, Kira touched the dog tags around her neck. 3 sets now. Her own commander tags. Pat's tags from Syria. And a new addition, tiny and worn, hanging on the same chain. Pat's 1994 BUD/S challenge coin, drilled and threaded so it could hang with the tags. A reminder, a promise, a legacy. Pat's voice echoed in memory, sharp and clear as ever. Show them what real strength looks like. And Kira's response, spoken quietly into the helicopter's roar, so only she could hear. Every day, Pat. Every single day. Back at Naval Special Warfare Training Facility, a new class was arriving. Buses pulling in, recruits uncertain and nervous, carrying the same mixture of hope and fear that every generation brought to this place. Among them, a small-framed woman with blonde hair stepped off the bus, looking around at the intimidating facility with wide eyes. A few recruits began to whisper, started to make assumptions, began the familiar pattern of judgments based on appearance rather than capability. Master Chief Crawford approached with properly fitted equipment in his arms. No assumptions, no judgments, just professional assessment of what size gear she actually needed. Welcome to Naval Special Warfare Training. Let's start by getting you gear that actually fits. What size do you need? The question was simple, revolutionary in its simplicity. Not, here's the smallest we have. Not, are you sure you're in the right place? Just, what size do you need? To the other instructors, quietly but firmly, Crawford said, we evaluate on capability, on performance, on what people can do, nothing else. Watch their actions, not their appearance. Let the data speak. Clear? Clear, Master Chief. The system had changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. Because one person had been brave enough to challenge it. Because others had been honest enough to admit their failures. Because Pat's death had led to something better instead of just more tragedy. Kira's evaluation report became classified required reading at every service academy. The findings were presented to senior leadership across all branches. The methodology was adopted by multiple training commands. Policy changes rippled through the Department of Defense over the following year. Each one a small step toward a system that evaluated evidence instead of assumptions. But the real impact was smaller and more personal. It was in the supplies sergeant who now asked every recruit what size they actually needed instead of assuming. It was in the instructor who caught himself about to dismiss a small-frame candidate, then stopped and said, show me what you can do, instead. It was in the evaluator who covered up the photos during assessment and scored based purely on performance data. It was in the letters that arrived at Kira's next duty station, sent by people she'd never met, telling her about changes they'd implemented or biases they'd confronted because of her work. It was in Duke's email from Hell Week, barely coherent from exhaustion, saying, I remembered your breathing technique during the worst parts, and I remembered that capability comes in unexpected packages, including me. Still here. Thanks for that. It was in Sloan's reports from JSOC, documenting instances of recruitment bias she'd identified and helped correct, using the methodology Kira had developed. Change doesn't happen by accident, Sloan wrote. It happens because people choose to make it happen. It was in Vin's photos from recruiting offices across the country, 17 candidates identified so far who would have been overlooked under old protocols. I see them now, the ones everyone else misses, because someone saw me. It was in Cole's message from Coronado, describing how he'd just helped a female recruit through water training using patience and honesty instead of dismissiveness. Daniel would have loved this, teaching people that physics doesn't care about appearance. That technique conquers strength, that everyone deserves a fair evaluation. Doing it for him, for you, for everyone who comes after. The work continued, the mission endured, and every day people made choices about whether to see past surface level, whether to evaluate evidence instead of assumptions, whether to be better than they were yesterday. Every day, strength had the opportunity to serve, and every day, more people chose to honor that opportunity. The story didn't end with easy answers or simple solutions. It ended with commitment to ongoing work, to daily choices, to the understanding that change was gradual and required constant effort from people willing to confront uncomfortable truths. Kira Brennan had completed her mission. The evaluation was done, the report was written, the changes were beginning. But her real work, like Pat's before her, would continue every day, in every interaction, in every choice to see people for who they really were, rather than who assumptions said they should be. That was the promise. That was the legacy. That was what strength serving really meant. The sun set over Coronado, painting the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. Another day ended. Another group of candidates began their journey, and the work of making the system better, fairer, more capable of recognizing excellence regardless of packaging, that work continued. One person at a time. One generation teaching the next, building something better from the foundations Pat had laid with her life. Not because the work was finished. It never would be. Bias was learned early and unlearned slowly. One person, one moment, one choice at a time. Not because the system was fixed, it wasn't. But it was better, measurably, demonstrably better. Not because Pat's death had been avenged or justified or made sense. It never would. Death rarely made sense, especially death born from preventable failure. But because Pat's death had meant something, it meant Crawford asking, "What size do you need?" instead of assuming. It meant Donovan seeing technique instead of appearance. It meant Thornton confronting guilt and choosing growth. It meant 4 recruits learning that strength came in forms they hadn't imagined. It meant a small-framed blonde woman stepping off a bus and being handed properly fitted gear by an instructor who'd learned to see capability before making assumptions. It meant the next woman who didn't fit the expected mold would face one less barrier, one less assumption, one less moment of having to prove herself before being given the chance to perform. That was enough. That was everything. The Pacific rolled eternal. Stars emerged overhead, and somewhere in the space between what had been and what could be, Pat Aldridge smiled. Her legacy wasn't monuments or medals. It was a supply sergeant asking the right question, an instructor withholding judgment, a commander admitting fault, a system becoming better because people chose to make it so. Strength serving, one moment at a time, one person at a time, one generation teaching the next. And that was enough.